Good morning and welcome to LPC's public hearing and public meeting of July 28th, 2026. We'll begin by taking attendance, and I will turn to General Counsel Mark Silberman to call the roll.
Chair Savage,
Here.
Vice Chair Master,
Here.
Commissioner Chen,
Yeah.
Commissioner Chu, Commissioner Ginsburg,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Ikwembe,
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Mahan,
Here.
Commissioner Wilder.
Here.
Today's public hearing and public meeting is being held in person in LPC's hearing room on the second floor of 253 Broadway. It is also being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube for anyone who would like to participate remotely or watch the proceedings. Our agenda today includes a public meeting agenda for applications for work on designated properties that have already had a public hearing and for which we have already heard testimony and are back today with revisions in response to our comments at the hearing, and a public hearing agenda for new applications for work on designated properties. With that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, Director of Preservation.
Thank you, Chair Savage, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 26-10512. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 487, Lot 29, 144 Spring Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is currently a vacant lot, and the application is to construct a new building. This was last presented at the public hearing of June 9th, 2026, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will present revisions to the proposal in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Okay, let's open the proceedings. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So move.
And Commissioner Chen, will you second the motion?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The proceedings are now open and the applicant may begin.
Very good. Good morning, Commissioners. Cass Stackelberg, Higgins, Quays, Barth & Partners. I'm joined by David Kubik, partner at BKSK Architects. David and I will be taking you through the design presentation. Very good. I believe there were a few commissioners here today who were not present back in June when we presented the project initially. So we'll give you a little bit of background and talk about some of the commissioners' comments at that time and how we have addressed them. The site is a vacant lot, 20 feet on Spring Street, 80 feet along Worcester Street on the southwest corner in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. The site is vacant and it has been vacant since 1943. And it's an interesting intersection with a range of different scales, ages, and building types immediately adjacent. On the left is the proposal that we shared with you in June, and on the right is our design revision. A few things just to point out. There was broad support for a 2-story commercial building on this site. We are proposing a building in UHPC, ultra high performance concrete, and there was interest and support for that material. And the comments that we heard focused kind of in 3 areas. One was just the detail of the UHPC and a desire to see a little bit more study there. You asked us to study the bulkhead and reduce the presence of it and integrate it into the overall design. And also there were comments about reducing the amount of signage that was included in the proposal. And on the right, our response top down includes modifications to the materiality, height, and color of the bulkhead to reduce visibility and integrate the building and the bulkhead together. We've addressed the articulation of proportionality of the facade and the materiality. And then finally, we have reduced the amount of signage incorporated into the facade. Just quickly, looking at the site, on the left, look that view of the corner and the adjacent 1820s federal style house and the other commercial buildings along the south side of Spring Street, and then a view looking north up Worcester of the vacant lot. And as we move around the corner, this is around the intersection. This is to the north on the northwest corner, an 1818 row house with an addition approved by the commission in 2010 directly to the north behind it. And then large scale loft buildings, this one on the northwest corner from 1896. And then another store and loft building. This is directly to the east, now on the southeast corner of Worcester and Spring Street. So a range of styles and scales at this corner. We talked quite a bit back in June about cast iron architecture. This is the cover of Daniel Badger's Architectural Ironworks catalog. And then from that catalog, on the right, an image of the Howat building on Broadway, built in 1856. And significant, I think, is this idea of replicating masonry in this cast material. And we've obviously drawn on that concept in the integration of UHPC. The ideas of fabrication that come with this, or prefabrication that come with a material, both the cast iron, but also the UHPC, where the building is basically constructed off-site and assembled on-site, and the repetitive use of ornament across the facades. And then finally, another page on the left from Badger's catalog, this idea of light transmission. So this is a slide illustrating the presence of vault lights that were integrated into historic cast iron buildings to bring light down into the lower levels. But of course, also the facades were intended to be light transmitting systems, not just at the storefront level, but on the upper floors for manufacture and commercial activity. And then the images on the right, cast iron vault lights, cast iron and glass vault lights on the upper right, and then on the lower right, the transition from cast iron to concrete vault lights in around 1900. And all of these ideas are informative of our design. David.
Thank you, Cass. David Kubik, partner at BKSK Architects. So to focus a little bit more on the details of the adjustments that we made, starting here, the currently proposed rendering, you can see on the bulkhead on the top, we did a few things. We were able to relocate some of the mechanical equipment to the north side of that bulkhead, which eliminated some of the mechanical louvers that were being seen there, as well as we lowered the heights of all the elements. So the roof of the bulkhead was lowered, the height of the glass on that bulkhead was lowered. And we also lifted the parapet by a few inches, by 3 inches. So the result is that that bulkhead gets a lot quieter in terms of what you see and the volumes that are visible up there, as well as we also adjusted the color. We picked a metal panel painted color that matches the UHPC, so it doesn't draw unnecessary attention to itself. It just sort of blends into the overall palette of the building. As Cass said, we also removed some of the signage, so there's no longer any signage on the second level of the building. The signage only occurs at the ground floor level, flanking the entries. So you can see in the spandrel, the signage there on the ground floor and one flag sign at each door. There's also just further refinement, which we'll walk through in the following slides, with the patterning across the facade and where it happens. I think there were great comments about trying to be a little bit more clear in terms of the hierarchy of where the pattern happens and the relationship between the different elements on the facade. And that's something that we worked on too, which we can show you. So here on the top left was the previous proposed kind of spandrel pattern, and then you can see the current proposed there on the bottom left. One of the comments on the original design was that maybe the pattern felt a little schematic in this, or blocky, because it was a very simple extrusion in one dimension, a simple cut through that spandrel pattern. So and also there was a worry that maybe it felt a little chunky, and was there a way to kind of further refine it and have it feel a little bit more finessed and have a nicer articulation to the pattern. So the way that we did that was to do a couple of things. One was to taper it. So you can see on the bottom right in the detail, the perforated pattern now has this sort of taper to it. So there's a thinner dimension at the face and a wider dimension at the back. It also went from being 2 inches thick to 3 inches thick, which also just gives it a little bit more of a substantialness to it, to the overall panel. So that was the first and most significant change to it. And then as well, we removed the pattern from the columns and let the pattern really remain at these decorative spandrel panels and at the crown of the building, which we'll show you. So then the result in our mind is that the frame, the column and beam elements read more clearly in a primary sense as frame, as structure, and the pattern is reserved for more secondary decorative moments on the facade. Also in the middle two images, you can see that the base of the building was given a little bit more dimension. The base previously was, because the sidewalk slopes, was 2 to 3 inches above the sidewalk, but in the current design, it's approximately 10 inches from the sidewalk. So here again, you can sort of see a before and after. And to touch on the pattern first, by removing the pattern from the columns, We're really pleased with how the primary structural frame reads hierarchically sort of first and clean. And then the pattern is reserved for those infill elements and a little bit of a decorative moment at the crown of the building, at the top of the building. You can also see here how the parapet was raised 3 inches. It used to be 3'6", now it's 3'9". That helped just mediate the visibility of some of the rooftop elements. And then just adjusting the signage. So again, on the ground floor, just showing something that feels a little more proportionally appropriate for the size panel that it sits in. And then finally there again at the base of the sidewalk, you can see that increased height, which just gives it a little bit more of a substantial base as it meets the sidewalk. Just looking at the wall section, the little diagram on the left, you can sort of see how the spandrel panels now have that tapered dimension, being 3 inches deep and about 1 inch on the face. And the effect of that in elevation, it both feels substantial and appropriate for the overall facade, but at the same time, it has some detail and finesse to it, so it doesn't feel too schematic or too simple. And just a reminder that the pattern for us was grew out of inspiration from a lot of the existing sort of mesh iron panel work that you see on these spandrel moments throughout the district. What we found was that they'd be actually quite abstract, simple geometric forms, repeated in an offset kind of pattern to create an interesting texture. That happened at the ground floor, but that also happens on upper stories. And even in more classical examples at 480 Broadway, you know, the balustrade sitting in front of the clear glass window behind. In terms of palette, we're still looking at this sort of bluish gray UHPC tone, and then the storefront remains the same as what we showed you before, with this sort of warm bronze painted finish for the aluminum elements, and that the painted metal finish there, that smaller chip would be for the bulkhead, so it could color match the UHPC. And then just a comparison of where we were and where we are. So this is the previously proposed elevation. And if we just skip to the next, you could see the previously proposed in a dashed line with the currently proposed in a solid line. So again, the roof of the bulkhead structure was lowered from 11 feet to 10 feet. And then the height of the glass was reduced from 9 feet to 7 feet. And that's what really allowed the big differences in terms of visibility from the street. And again, in this area here, there used to be mechanical equipment and mechanical louvers. We were able to relocate that to the other side and keep everything on the north side and just use a perforated metal screen there instead, which allowed for a simpler, quieter reading to that box volume there on the roof. And then here again, you can see that the parapet was lifted ever so slightly from 3.6 to 3.9, which also just controlled the visibility a bit. Here in section, you can start to see the relationship of those panels and how they're tapered and how they sit in front of the glass. So very similar from before, but that tapered pattern really changes the reading of those panels. You can see in elevation, the pattern is actually more solid at the base and opens up as you go higher up into the building. So again, it still feels substantial, but it has a nice detail to it at the face. And just a reminder, as Cass said, just like the cast iron elements historically, these UHPC elements would be prefabricated and could be assembled on site with minimal seams between the elements, and really lends itself well to the sort of repetitive detailing and composition to the facade. So this is just a diagram on the left for the columns and beam panels, as well as the decorative spandrel panels and how they would get assembled on site. The detail in the upper right is just another good view of how the tapered profile would show itself. Just another more detailed look at the panels and the signage panels, just documenting what you saw in elevation in terms of the lettering height, the metal panel height, as well as the flag sign and where that occurs. This is remains the same from the last proposal in terms of we do have a linear light that runs just behind the decorative spandrel panels, and just to give a sort of soft glow behind these patterned panels at nighttime to kind of accentuate that pattern in the reading of the building. And then two visibility studies, the previous on the left, the proposed on the right. So again, previously, what you were seeing were the louvers of that mechanical screened area, whereas now we would just see the painted metal panel of the bulkhead. Same idea. Here's that mechanical screen previously and the simple volume with the new revision. There was also kind of multiple steps to this bulkhead in terms of the face of it. One was further back than the other. We kind of simplified and rationalized that to be simpler. And then again, you could see the visible amount of glass here and how that's substantially reduced with the height reductions. And then the plans, these remain essentially the same. It's a speculative commercial building with retail on the first and second floor. On the roof, there's just this one little small space for the access from the stair and the elevator before walking out onto the terrace. And then here's that bulkhead roof. Here's where that mechanical was relocated to the north side behind a perforated metal screen. Nothing visible on this side. These are two very small, low pieces of equipment that didn't need to be screened and are not visible. So just concluding the previously proposed and the currently proposed, just seeing again the differences in the bulkhead adjustments and also just a further clarity and in the design of the UHPC and the kind of hierarchy between the elements.
Okay, commissioners, questions? Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm glad you made the modification to reduce the rooftop addition. And then I'm wondering whether by raising the 3 inches on top of the parapet, have you done a study after making modification without adding the 3 inches?
We looked at both. We thought that this was still the best approach without, adjusting it too much, right? So the options for that parapet are anything between 3'6" and 4 feet. You don't want to go above 4. We tried all of those. 4 feet felt like too much, but the 3'9" still felt good in terms of the balance of the elements and just, still having a celebratory top, a sort of celebratory crown to the building, but not overpowering. Yeah.
Commissioner Jefferson?
So a question of architecture versus function. The second floor, you have this strip, used to be for lettering, no longer functional. Why keep it?
We did look at that as well. It's a great question. We do think it's nice the composition is about stacking these repetitive elements, right? Both the columns and the beams and the panels. So just in terms of its relationship to the ground floor, it felt good to keep that the same. It also does have a function in terms of the interior planning. We would expect that the retailer may need to, have drop ceilings or ductwork or certain ceiling elements, and we didn't want to see that through the glass. So we thought that this was nice compositionally to keep it balanced, but also just good future planning for what you would see and not see on the inside.
Commissioner Mann?
Apologies that I wasn't here the first time around. This may have been asked, but very simple question. Why did you choose a UHPC?
It's a great question. So when we looked at the district, we were really interested in the evolution of technology and how cast iron created this sort of story and journey about how architects used it. It began as sort of a faithful recreation of classical stone facades, and then eventually it became its own language. The cast iron could achieve things structurally and proportionally that you would never do in actual stone. 101 Spring Street we showed in June as kind of a great culminating example of that, where the ground floor columns were thinner than the top story. And so that journey was inspiration, and what we said to ourselves, well, what's the next chapter in terms of materials that architects could use to kind of reinvent the styles or the languages within the district? And it felt like UHPC is sort of today what cast iron was then, that it's a prefabricated material. It can take relief and pattern. It could be prefabricated. It could take these soft curves and shapes to it So it's a very kind of plastic and moldable material. So for us, it felt like the next natural evolution in this district in terms of technology and innovation.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, not seeing any other questions. I just want to note that we received the following comments since the June 9th public hearing, that the Victorian Society of New York recommended denial of the application. Okay, so this is a proposal to construct a two-story commercial building, a taxpayer in typology in a district with a wide range of scales and styles, and in a design that is contemporary interpretation of the cast iron buildings in Soho, like we just heard. In general, the commissioners found the building to be appropriate, but raised issues regarding the prominence of the bulkhead and made suggestions regarding lowering its height and changing the color, and suggested a stronger building base, reducing the signage, and some made suggestions regarding the profiles and details of the panels. The applicant has revised their design to address many of these comments. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start our discussion?
Yeah. So I found this appropriate last time. I think you've made it better. I will always say I wish there wasn't the screening requirement for the mechanical equipment. I'm going to be a broken record on this. But since there is, you reduced it. I think to reduce, I really have no issues with this. And I think the refinement of the panels does make it better and more fitting. And I think this is a really nice modern interpretation with a modern material of the type of cast iron architecture that Soho is known for.
Commissioner Jefferson.
I thought you could go across the way. Oh, I find this totally appropriate. I think the revisions they made were wonderful. They made the screening much more muscular rather than two-dimensional. They made it three-dimensional. I think, and the penthouse being the same color as the building, everything has become much better.
Commissioner Pembe, excuse me.
Yes. I really enjoy the refinement of the panels and also the clear hierarchy that was placed between the panels and the columns themselves. I appreciate the reducing of the presence of the bulkhead, not in just height, but also in color. And the reduction of signage is nice as well. Find it appropriate.
Commissioner Chen.
I'm glad that the applicant, first of all, is a very thoughtful, thoroughly researched design. I think that, yes, the reduction in sign is appropriate. I think the refinement of the detail is an improvement. I'm glad that they reduced the top, and especially by making the top edition less visible. I do have no problem with keeping it at 3'6" if it's the height. I personally do not think that additional 3 inches is necessary for the visibility. I think the proportion wise for my taste, somehow it seems this thing looks rather large on the top.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I think it's appropriate. I think that changes are subtle but effective. It's okay.
And Vice Chair Master.
I agree. I think I was largely supportive last time, but the applicant has done a wonderful job in being responsive to our comments in terms of minimizing the visibility of the bulkhead, making it blend, increasing the parapet. It was also very effective, reducing the signage and the little changes to the details that they gave for the facade, I think significantly It just makes the building so much better. So congratulations, this is wonderful.
Great. And Commissioner Mahan and Wilder, I know you weren't here last time, but
Okay, so it's two of us, I guess, that
Not alone.
weren't here. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Commissioner Wilder. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't here last time, so that may be a reason for having a little bit of a different take than the other commissioners so far. I can certainly find, the massing and scale appropriate, the inclusion of parapet, the setbacks, the bulkheads, and so forth. I do struggle with the materiality, as I understand it, narrated by the applicant. Cast iron was initially intended to replicate masonry. Now we're using masonry to replicate cast iron, which was replicating masonry as described by the applicant. These, though, are not the tectonics of masonry, UHPC. And so I just find it, the materiality and expression of the tectonic odd, the decorative panels, perhaps. Lots of really interesting material in the appendix of the application about how three-dimensionality was represented in 2 dimensions in the cast iron catalogs. The particular expression here, though, for me, is a little reminiscent of garden trellises. So there's, in my reading of this project, a fair amount of mixed metaphors that sort of lead to a lack of clarity, I have to say. So I'm not sure that this one is for me.
Commissioner Wilder?
Yes, so thanks to the applicant. It seems like they have made some updates from the previous presentation, which I was not there for. So presentations. Initially, just bonds, I did kind of struggle with the design and mainly the of it. Are a lot of elements I do like about it. I'll speak closer. I think it was a sort of, we'll say, calculated risk in the selection of the UHPC material. And I say calculated because I think you justified it in your design methodology of why you went this route, and I can appreciate the boldness in taking the chance. I think if you were going to do it, this is probably the best location to do it as well. So there are things that I like about it. I do enjoy the panels. For me, I think those are the things that kind of those are the elements that tie it together and make it work more for me. If they weren't there, I would probably struggle more with it. I do think that it's too high at the parapet. I think that is probably better. I want it to feel a little more like the spandrel, in terms of the height and scale. Yeah, it's the the analogy, the cast iron. It's pretty it's interesting, right? I think the building looks good. I'm just struggling with the material overall. Bulkhead, it was a good move to bring it down some. It does look like it made a big difference and drawing attention to it. So yeah, I can find it appropriate, but yeah, I'm not 100% on board.
Okay, well, we have, I think, 6 votes as is, and we could add exploring the railing height with staff to the motion. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Ginsburg, could you read the motion?
Yep. With regards to LPC 26-10512, 144 Spring Street, Soho Cast Iron District, a vacant lot application is to construct a new building. I note that the Soho Cast Iron District is characterized by a range of 19th century building types, including former residential buildings from the early 19th century and larger cast iron and masonry commercial buildings from the second half of the 19th century, as well as low-scale 20th century commercial buildings and two-story garage taxpayers. I also note that the immediate surrounding landscape features a mix of surviving and altered federal houses ranging in from 3 to 5 stories at Spring Street, and large cast iron store and loft buildings ranging from 4 to 6 stories on Worcester. I recommend approval, finding that the construction of a new building on this vacant lot will provide a termination to the block and will strengthen the streetscape of the corner site, that the height and overall volume of the new building will be comparable with the varying scales of buildings along both block fronts and particularly Spring Street, which features several small-scale buildings, that the plane of the facade will align with the facade of the adjacent properties, thereby reinforcing the street wall, a consistent feature of the streetscape, that the addition to the 19th century store and loft buildings, there are a variety of other building types in the districts, including 1 and 2-story garages and taxpayers, federal houses, and 1930s and late 20th century commercial buildings, which in some cases are either a site-specific response or a zoning responsive design like the proposed new building. That the design of the building utilizing cast iron-inspired ductile concrete cladding will employ the latest structural materials in construction and assembly and will recall the evolution of materials in the historic district, which illustrates the evolution of the building technology from wood frame houses to masonry, load-bearing construction, and cast iron assemblies, which strive for transparency by encompassing large areas of glass. That the highly detailed organic pattern precast ductile concrete columns, beams, and cornices, three-dimensional open spandrel panels and railings, all with gray finish, and the simply detailed recessed display windows and entrances at both facades will harmonize with cast iron buildings throughout the historic district. That the proposed signage consisting of lettering in bays close to Spring Street and Worcester Street entrances and a blade sign adjacent to each door will be well scaled to the building and in keeping with the signage historically found throughout the historic district. That the gray metal cladding, penthouse bulkhead, and mechanical screen are simply masked and subservient to the primary facade below and will blend with the building and be consistent with the existing rooftop accretions found within the district, and that the new building will enhance the special architectural and historic character of the streetscape and the historic district. And working with staff, the applicant can play with the exact height of the parapet.
Vice Chair Master, can you second the motion?
Second.
And Mark, can you call the vote?
Chair Krusevich,
Aye.
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quembe,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Nay.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
Move to our next item, Corey.
All right, public meeting item number 2 is LPC 26-01951, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 209, Lot 1, 277 Canal Street, aka 277 to 289 Canal Street and 418 to 422 Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. This is a Renaissance Revival style theater, store, and loft building designed by David Altarsh and built in 1927 to 28. The application is to construct a vertical enlargement and establish a master plan governing the installation of storefront infill and signage. This was last presented at the public hearing of June 23rd, 2026, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will present revisions to the proposal in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Okay, thank you, Corey. I do want to note that Commissioner Chen is recused on this item. Let's open the proceedings. Commissioner Mahan, will you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Wilder, will you second?
Yeah.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are now open and you may begin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners. We are the preservation consultants for this project. As Corey mentioned, we're back for this public meeting after our public hearing in June, at which the Commission expressed overall support for a new addition here, but asked us to consider a few things. First, that we reduce the height of the building or provide further justification or documentation to support the appropriateness of the proposed height, and to explore simplifying the shaft of the proposed building. We have done all three of those things. We also would like to provide some clarification on the transit bonus and the zoning that impacts the site. There was a bit of confusion when we first went through the proposal. So what we're going to do is begin with Ellen Lehman, Land Use Counsel from Fried Frank, to walk us through the specifics of the transit bonus and the zoning overlay for the building, and how that shapes what's being proposed. And then Christopher Courtney of Morris Ajmi Architects is going to take you through the specifics of the design changes, and the rationale or the whys for what is being proposed, building on what we shared previously. And then finally, I'll come back and join you again to talk through the specific case for the appropriateness of the building's height in the context of the historic district. And so with that, I'll introduce Ellen Lehman.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ellen Lehman at Fried Frank Land Use Council on the project. At the June hearing, a number of commissioners expressed an appreciation for the way development is shaped by its zoning context, which in turn is shaped to serve broad public policy goals and address the needs of the city. So we thought it would be helpful to very briefly describe that context behind this project. It goes without saying, the city is facing a housing crisis, and tackling that crisis requires both ambition and urgency. Creating housing and affordable housing was a chief goal of the Soho-NoHo rezoning in 2021. When it adopted that rezoning, the City Planning Commission noted the particular importance from an equity perspective of adding housing in an opportunity-rich neighborhood that lacks income-restricted housing. That neighborhood rezoning was a precursor to City of Yes for Housing Opportunity in 2024, the single largest change to the zoning resolution since 1961. City of Yes addresses the housing crisis at a citywide level by making it possible to build a little more housing in every neighborhood. This is a slide from City Planning's final presentation on that proposal, showing the unequal distribution of housing production in the city. According to a report by the Furman Center, Manhattan Community Board 2 has produced just 119 low-income units in the last 15 years. Zoning for accessibility is another citywide initiative crafted to make the city more livable by making the transit system more accessible and more quickly. Just 155 of the city's 493 subway stations are accessible. The ZFA text offers a floor area bonus in high-density areas for developers that design, construct, and finance major improvements to a mass transit station. The MTA has identified the Canal Street station as a priority in its current capital plan. To earn a floor area bonus under this program, the City Planning Commission must find that the public benefit derived from the proposed transit improvements merit the amount of the floor area bonus, and that the proposed improvements constitute a, quote, significant enhancement to the network. The planned improvements at 277 Canal Street include, among other upgrades, the excavation and dewatering of additional subgrade area to more than double the pedestrian circulation space, the construction of a new elevator shaft and waiting area removed from the congested sidewalk, and new accessible entryways directly onto the subway platform. In a letter to the Commission dated July 21st, the MTA noted the critical importance of these proposed transit improvements to bringing accessibility to this highly trafficked station complex. As compared to the proposal seen in 2023, shown on the left here, the height of the development has increased to accommodate the ZFA bonus, as shown on the right. As a standalone site, 277 Canal Street would not generate a sufficient bonus to cover the costs of making a, quote, significant enhancement to the transit network. In order to finance the cost of the improvements that MTA requested, the owner made a deal to merge the zoning lot with an adjacent site seen here in the key plan on the top right. The zoning lot merger increases the maximum bonus available to make the transit scope feasible. As a condition to merging the zoning lots, the owner of the adjacent parcel required a minimum transfer of development rights, and those rights are shown in pink. That transfer results in the delivery of additional housing units, including affordable units. In total, the project will deliver 159 new apartments, including 31 affordable units.
Good morning, Commissioners. Christopher Courtney from MA Architects. So I'm going to run through two of the comments that Commissioners asked us to address. Explore simplifying the shaft of the proposed building and reduce the building height. So first I'm going to explain the reasoning for the shift in the building height within the shaft of the building. Previously, I'd only explained that as a marketability concern or issue. It's fairly simple. We have rentals in the bottom of the building, and we're proposing condos in the top of the building. Both of these have different market expectations, however, in terms of their clear floor ceiling heights. So essentially, this is what's driving the unequal floor heights through the shaft of the building. Why condo? The building is going to be tremendously expensive in addition to covering the MTA improvements. So this generally helps to cover the costs. To jump for a minute to addressing the comment to reducing the building height, we did work with brokers to reduce each section to the lowest possible that still allows competitive rentals and sales. So to sort of walk through the previous on the left here, we're showing 9'9" clear heights generally in the area of the building that's rentals. This string of dimensions shows the floor-to-floor heights. This is the clear dimension. And so we've reduced each floor by 9 inches to give a 9-foot clear dimension for the rentals. And then similarly for the condos, a 10-foot 9 clear previously reduced 9 inches to 10-foot clear for the condo floors. So generally speaking, a 9-inch reduction on all the floors. This gives us a total of a 12'6" reduction in the building height, which is a little bit over the height of one of the floors of the building previously as it was with its floor-to-floor height. So essentially from 232 feet 9 inches to 220 feet 3 inches, again a 12'6" total reduction. Self-reflection. Okay. Oh, 2 minutes, but that's okay. You got it. All right, fantastic. Thank you. So why 9 feet and why 10 feet? Again, we worked with brokers. We talked through what the minimum standards are in the district in general, which happens to be the same as the whole city. So that's 10 foot for condos as a minimum and 9 foot for rentals, basically just to meet the market. So the building is meeting the minimum market standards moving forward. The map on the right shows a few comparable buildings in the district. Many of these are older loft-style residential and co-op buildings. They have floor heights that range between 10 and 13 feet. So there's a bit of a disadvantageous competition to start that 277 Canal will be up against. The map also is focused on comparable buildings on highly trafficked streets, which are highlighted sort of here. Obviously, we're at the corner of 2 of those. So another just generally inherent marketable disadvantage. But in general, the building needs to be marketable, it needs to be competitive, and ceiling heights are a huge component of providing that. Jumping back a little bit to the height difference in the middle of the building, we're zoomed in here to show what's actually happening at the facade when we jump the floor height. So we're here at the 12th floor and the 13th floor. We have 9'9". This is the floor to floor. Again, that's a 9 foot clear, 10'9". And so all of the floors have the same fenestration pattern of a fixed panel with an operable sash above. Rather than having any of these be the same height as each other, we've sort of given a strategy to sort of break that down and sort of blend dimensions. So for instance, 2 feet jumps to 2'3", 5'3" jumps to 6 feet. This is the same strategy that we had previously. We just hadn't really gotten into it much to show. So obviously, though, this has been updated to show the adjusted heights that we've come back with. Here we're zoomed in a 3D version of this just to see the same thing. So where that's happening is here. We think this is not noticeable close up and certainly harder to spot from the street. We also took the opportunity to look at the pilasters and the design of those. There were a few comments about maybe the fussiness of detailing for those. So we previously had sort of a 3-part breakdown. We've reduced it to 2 parts, so the base still reads the same as 4 bricks across, which you can see here, and then that transitions to still an angled condition. That angle just extends up and terminates at the top of the body, which is the bottom of the crown. Generally speaking, we'll see in the next few slides, this helps to give a bit more of a grounding to the lower portion of the building, and definitely gives more of a deference to the crown. There were some thoughts and concerns about the crown maybe not reading as distinctly. This is more of a proportional tweak, but we think it's an improvement, especially now that we're compressing some of the floors. And in general, the change of where that now is happening, we've aligned with where the window heights are and the floor heights are changing. So here we have a Canal Street elevation comparing the proposed and the previous. We can see a 12'6" overall reduction in building height. Again, we can read the sort of the grounding and the comparison of more heavy brick towards the bottom of the building, certainly rising up more in the body of the building. As we can kind of compare here, there's a lot more of a balance. Previously, the change was happening as a proportional change through the body of the building only, sort of in equal parts. So the change is really to give more, like I said, a deference to the crown and to read a little bit more distinctly as opposed to more of a blend, which was happening previously. Here, if it's helpful, there's a little marker to kind of understand where the heights of the floor heights sort of change, and that we feel that that's not perceptible from the street as much. Jumping down to the storefront doors, there was a great suggestion from one of the commissioners last time to look at an optionality for flexibility of the retail for single doors as well as double doors. So we took advantage of that. Previously, we were showing sort of 3 examples of where storefront doors could be, and in all cases, we were showing a centered double door. In all cases, these are following the tripartite rhythm that happens originally in the building on the 2nd and 3rd floors that's been carried down and up through the building. And so our proposal still sort of shows 3 examples of storefront door conditions. On the left here, we're introducing a single door in the center that's matched with a fixed panel. That fixed panel has the same base condition. Sorry, these are small. Another option is just to flank a single door on the left side, still maintaining the tripartite, and we're still maintaining the double door condition that we showed previously. And then this one also shows a single door banked onto the right side. Here we have the Broadway elevation. So again, we can see the 12'6" height difference. We can see the change in the material change and the sort of stronger read of the base and the crown as distinct parts to each other. And then I'm going to kind of run through the next sets of comparison slides of the building as seen throughout the district rather quickly, but just to point a few things out here, again, we can sort of see the height change, but we can see very strongly that distinction of the crown reading versus the body of the building. Here we can certainly see the height difference change. Again, 12'6", just a little bit over the height of a floor. Here, certainly from further away, the perception of the floor height shift is not perceived. That's happening right here. At the street level experience, here we can see generally how one experiences tall buildings in a street scale, which is to say you're experiencing the crossing of Canal Street here rather than the top of the building per se. Here we took the opportunity, it's hard to see in this slide, but we took the opportunity to actually lower the spring point that's happening on the sort of faux pilasters on the lot line. You can read that a little clearer here, where previously you could actually read where that change was happening. We wanted to kind of mask that and pull that down. In this case, the faux arches are the same width as they were. The faux pilasters are the same width as they were. We're just sort of pulling that down and stretching that down so that it's sort of out of view from the street above the adjacent buildings. Here we're looking down south on Broadway. We can see 401 in the distance. We can see the change in the height of the building. Here we can see the building adjacently to the building across the street, and just kind of the perception of how that building sort of pops up. You know, this building pops up from its neighbor, 277 pops up from its neighbor. There's about a 1.5 floor jump versus a 2.5 floor jump, so we can kind of read that nicely in this image. And then secondary streets, we can kind of read the change too. Again, the lot line facade turns into, you know, the courtyard with punched windows, but the other lot line wall sort of starts to fall out of view in this exact image. And then this is the last of the comparison slides, just again another view of a secondary street, and where you can strongly read the sort of reduction of height in the building. With that, I'll hand it back to Erin. Thanks.
Great. So, to address the specifics of the appropriateness for the project, the appropriateness is rooted in three basic ideas: that the proposed building maintains and participates in the dynamic Broadway streetscape characterized by the juxtapositions of scale that reflect the evolution of the district through building use and building technology. And it follows the typical pattern of development and tradition of tall buildings on Broadway, and reflects the evolution of the city and addresses the city's needs through the built form. And so we're going to take you through each of those points with supportive information. So going back to the original proposed presentation during the public hearing, Soho is of course characterized by three distinct phases of development. You just heard about those in the previous application as well. And these are determined by use of the buildings and the building technology, but it results in a distinct character of scale and architectural form for each of the specific phases. And so you have a characterized context of the former residential buildings of 2 to 3 stories. These are masonry. The cast iron buildings typically 5 to 6 stories, and then the tall commercial buildings primarily located on Broadway that are in the range of 9 to 12 stories. And it's these buildings that create the varied character of the district and provide an opportunity to allow for greater varied design and bulk within the streetscape on Broadway. So we looked at that in plan, and here are the 3 phases mapped out along Broadway. So on the left is that sort of earliest phase, that converted residential architecture, and what remains of it on Broadway, overlaid with the mid to late 19th century cast iron and smaller commercial building development, and the taller building development that we see at the turn of the century. And so what you're seeing here are two important things. One is that this exists, this characterizing juxtaposition that we see in plan by the sort of the dark purple and the light purple is occurring in almost every block. So it's not specific to one single block within the district. And then there's this overlay of the earlier smaller scale buildings that create even larger contrast and abrupt transitions in scale that we'll look at specifically. And we also see these specifically on the corners of buildings in the district. And so here are two examples. And again, these are just select examples. It happens along Broadway. But looking at the corner specifically and the condition that we step down to a lower scale on the side streets. So immediately to the north of our block on the corner of Howard and Broadway, we have 434 Broadway, and you can see the step down along Howard Street, and we've provided the proportional relationship of the flanking buildings here. So the adjacent building on Howard is 125% smaller than the corner building. We have a later building that's outside of those periods of development, the significant periods of development, but again, really speaks to the character of the variegated streetscape and abrupt changes in scale that we see on Broadway. So that is at something close to 350% taller than the adjacent building there at, I think that's 440 Broadway. And then moving to the north a little bit at 458 Broadway, this is on the corner of Grand Street. We have that late phase tall building anchoring the corner, and then the stepping down of the earlier phases. And so here you see the earliest phase and then a somewhat taller building. So this characteristic up and down that we see on both Broadway, which is more populated with the tall buildings, but on the side streets, a distinctive step down in scale and character. So that is a sort of 200% decrease in scale. And here we're stepping down twice, I think, with 100% decrease to the south. We don't just see that on corner buildings. We see that in the mid-block here with 583 Broadway. And then that is flanked by two earlier phase buildings. This one has a 300% difference in height, and to the north and to the south, 140% difference in height. And then 270 Lafayette, which is of course not a Broadway building. It's at the corner of Lafayette and Prince Street, but it is the tallest historic building in the historic districts. So, and is contemporaneous with the construction of the original 277 Canal. And you see it in contrast to the three-story federal period buildings in the streetscape. So this is how you experience the buildings. This is not, this juxtaposition and abrupt changes in scale are not a distraction in the district, but really what makes it a vibrant, energetic place that makes one look up in the district. We see that in the overall streetscape. So just focusing on Broadway first. So this is the east side of Broadway with our proposal in context. And you can see that it's maintaining that consistent up and down, lots of variation in the streetscape. But what we're also seeing is the width of Canal as the widest street south of Houston Street, and the continuity of proposing a tall building on this corner to anchor the corner and work within the variation in the streetscape. On the west side of Broadway, at the bottom here, Canal Street is we're directly across the street from this site, and you can see immediately to the south the very tall building at 401 Broadway, and then a similar tall street wall building comparable to ours at 399 Broadway. And then on Canal Street, this is the north side of Canal with our building in context, and we can see again that characteristic step down that happens on the side streets from the tall corner anchor. Looking at that in a bit more detail, zoomed in, you can see the proposed building, the width of Canal Street and the narrow streets to the north, and the sort of urban gesture to locate tall buildings on wide streets. And then immediately, again, here's our corner, opposite our corner, and the location of the buildings, the tall buildings immediately to the south. So the Broadway corridor, we looked at the sort of 2 blocks to the north and to the south of the site because there's a shared history and a continuity between the north and south sides of Canal Street historically and in the current condition. And that is part of the rationale for why we can look to buildings outside of the district to contextualize the height of 277. And so here we have the site on the northeast corner. It is at the juncture of 3 historic districts, the original Soho Cast Iron District, the extension from 2010, and then the Tribeca East Historic District. And the boundary for the districts runs along Canal Street. Which is 100 feet wide. You see Broadway is 80 feet. We have the subway running directly under the site. And then the subway entries for this station specifically are at the 4 corners of north and south of Canal Street. So it unifies, it's a sort of experience. There was a significant historical change that resulted from the construction of the subway, and it marks these 4 corners. When you are on Broadway, you don't perceive this as a boundary as much as a continuation of the Broadway corridor. And so we see that this is a historic view looking north from Walker Street. So this is the site of what is now 401 Broadway. And you can see this march of commercial architecture, the varied scales, but there is continuity between what is happening south of Canal Street, which is right here. This is during subway construction, and what is happening to the north of Canal Street. And today we still experience that same continuity, except many of the buildings have changed as a result of, in part, the construction of the subway, but also later changes that from demolition and replacement of that original earlier layer of historic fabric. And so looking at that in elevation, we have these amazing 1899 elevations of Broadway covering that area. So just on the west side of Broadway and then the east side where our building is sited. And it gives you the sort of original layer of low scale buildings and how the sort of first phase of the taller buildings are integrated into the streetscape. And we compare that with today, which we see here. We see really significant changes that happen at Canal. Part of this, as I mentioned, is related to the subway construction. Buildings were destabilized during construction of the subway, so they ended up eventually being raised, although not raised specifically for subway construction. And the kind of freestanding bank between Lispenard and Canal, and then as we go south, the stepped, very characteristic 1916 zoning of 401 Broadway at 345 feet, and then 399 at 203. And then looking at those juxtapositions in the context of 277 and how these relationships hold between the 2 historic districts. We also as we look outside the district, these are views from the site. And this is more to identify tall buildings within the immediate physical context, but also your experience of the building in the streetscape. So as we're on the corner of Canal and Broadway looking south, we have 401 Broadway rising up in the distance. 399 is just south of that, but you see the sort of layering and the march along Broadway of the buildings, and of course these lower scale buildings in the foreground. Similarly, as we look to the west, 32 Avenue of the Americas, rising up. This is 2 blocks away, but it's this. Again, it's more about the experience of how you read buildings in the urban context with the foregrounding and backgrounding of tall and low-rise buildings. And so looking outside the district for context and support for a tall new building is not unprecedented in LPC's approvals in the past. Here are just two specific examples, 100 Barrow Street and 250 Water Street. And here, the findings for each of these projects specifically relates to buildings outside of the district that are become part of the visual context of the proposed building. So in the case of 100 Barrow, it is the archive building directly to the west that provides context and support for the approved new building at 100 Barrow. And then also 250 Water, which is built on the very edge of the district and is seen as a foreground to a very contemporary tall skyline that rises up above it. So these are specific cases where the commission has looked outside of the district for a rationale to support a tall building within a different historic district. As Ellen mentioned, and as we discussed previously, the city is shaped through zoning currently and historically. And so just to touch on that a little bit, just in terms of what that means for this project, but also just as we face this sort of brave new world of trying to integrate more bulk into historic districts under the city initiatives. We see on the left, this is a rendering prepared by Hugh Ferris, and this is contrasting the sort of characteristic 1916 zoning with its stepped massing with what would become the 1961 zoning. And so 1916 is addressing what was the sort of the endless rise of the street wall, and so it creates setbacks and the sky exposure plane in order to provide light and air to primarily to narrow streets. And it identifies locations where tall buildings can be built through the identification of wide and narrow streets and gives it a factor of 2 or 1, whatever the zone was, in order to achieve your street wall height. And then, of course, in 1961, in reevaluating how that all works, we see the creation of public plazas that allowed for more open space off of the sidewalk and created something that was more related to a pedestrian experience and for users at the street level rather than what was happening in the articulated form of the architecture. And as Ellen described, Soho NoHo really, I mean, it was specific to the neighborhood. This is a specific initiative to equalize the playing field a little bit. And prior to that, some of you might remember, everything was through special permit. Retail wasn't allowed in Soho. You needed a special permit prior to Soho NoHo. You needed a special permit to do retail on the ground floor unless you could document that it was in place before 1961. And you've all been to Soho, you know, it's a shopping mall. And so it's like, so it was only the select few that could really avail themselves of these processes to do things as of right. You had no as of right residential development. It was special permit. So this really fundamentally changed and recognized how the neighborhood was being used. And this proposal is really in the context of that. How do you shape something that needs to deliver on all of these important civic initiatives and be of today? And does that disrupt the reading or harmony of the historic district, or does it stimulate it? Does it energize the streetscape? Does it create something new? And of course, our argument is that it creates something new and stimulates the environment. And I think this is a perfect example of how that has evolved. We go from the pre-1916 zoning of the tall commercial building in Soho, here, this located on the corner of Broadway and Houston, typical street wall construction. 270 Lafayette Street in 1927 becomes the last significant building constructed in the historic district. It has a tall street wall because it's on a wide street, Lafayette, and then it has that cascading form that was typical of the 1916 zoning. And so we're seeing all of that come together, and it becomes this mini layer within the district. More recently, we see how the commission has acted in the past with 40 Mercer. This is the Jean Nouvel building, constructed between 2002 and 2008. And this is a completely unique form within the historic district. It's not just an inspired, creative interpretation of the cast iron buildings and the expanses of glass. It is marrying two phases of development into a single building with a base that relates to the cast iron buildings, and then the tower, the slab, that relates to the taller buildings. But it is a base with a setback tower. This is a broken massing. It's not a street wall. And that is unprecedented in the historic district. And then they went a step further and left a vacant yard on the side. So it is reflecting everything that has happened in the past in the district and bringing it together in really significant, and I think something that everybody lauds as an important contemporary building within the historic district. But it is reflecting something completely unique, and I think proposes the opportunity to continue thinking in that way. I'm almost finished, I promise. We looked at landmark buildings with subway entries, and this is really about iconic buildings that evolved with subways integrated into them. So historically, subways were built or included in major construction projects because the developer wanted it. It was an amenity, it was a status symbol, it was progress. This was meaningful. So you have 30 Rock, where we have a plaza level, street level entry, but then at the Chrysler Building in 32 Avenue of the Americas, where the entry is within the building and is really meant to be an amenity to bolster the prestige of the building itself. And so this is all prior to, this is all private development. This is not incentivized in any way. And then when the aging transit system gets to a point where it needs improvements, it looks to developers and incentivizes them to be able to address the transit improvements. And we see that in what was eventually approved as Hearst Tower. That included, when the transit bonus started, it was only for specific areas of the city, primarily Midtown, I think, beginning in the 80s. But Hearst Tower received a 3 FAR bump. So this building was approved, the tower was approved with something like 6 additional floors as a result of the transit improvements that they were proposing as part of the overall approval for landmarks, and then eventually had a ULURP as well. And then finally, there was some concern, I think, on the part of at least one commissioner about this being a precedent for other comparable developments. We think that this is a unique case, and that the history and specifics of the physical conditions really limit the ability to apply this to other sites within the historic district. It is the only site within the historic district that has a subway running beneath it. Everything else runs along the street. The subway, if you remember the specific history, the subway they demolished the previously existing building to construct the subway, and then it was 20 years before a building was actually built, and that building, the existing building, incorporated the subway entry, the existing subway entry. It is located at the intersection of 2 wide streets, and so since 1916, the wide streets are the location for the tallest buildings. This, by even under 1916 zoning, you could have a 200-foot street wall at the site, and it is located on a corner of Broadway, replicating all of those conditions that we see elsewhere, and continues the tall building concentration along Broadway, and is within one block of taller buildings immediately outside of the district in another historic district. And so for all of those reasons, we think this is really not something that can be applied uniformly to other sites. And so with all that in mind, I'm just going to sort of walk you through the renderings. Christopher already showed these, but I think just looking at these through the lens of that context, the layering that we see looking to the south, how you read the lower-rise buildings in the foreground, and the relationship of the ups and downs, and how that proposed building at 277 really continues that rhythm along the streetscape. And similarly on Canal Street, where we return and step down to the lower-rise buildings, the view south with 401 Broadway in the background, and south of Canal, all sort of integrated and woven together. The back view. This aerial view, which is, of course, well, maybe some of us would be lucky enough to have that view, but the new construction, this is within the same block. It is outside the historic district, but it is under construction, and will set a new scale for the block itself. Along Canal Street, the up and down rhythm, and then that perspective looking up Canal, looking up Broadway, and that sort of pedestrian or human scale perspective. And so that is it for me. I think that Albert LeBeau is going to make a few points, and then that will conclude our presentation.
Thanks, Erin. Every time I listen to her, I learn something new, really. But now our building's a status symbol, right? By having a subway in our building. First of all, thank you so much for having us come back. You know, my office has been in Soho for 35 years, and for 25 years, we owned this particular building. And every time we go to a community board meeting or hearing, people come up to me and say, why can't you put an elevator into this building? I mean, we desperately need it. The community desperately needs it. So when we 2 years ago, we were very excited to have our project approved by the commission. First one to bring affordable housing, first one out of Soho rezoning. We got a call, of course, from the MTA and from the community board said, listen, we want to put an elevator in your building. I said, okay, well, you know, it's really needed in the community. And we said, okay, we'll be a partner in this. So we did pencils down and we went back to the drawing board and put everything on hold. And here we are again. Yes, we got a transit bonus, but that's what we need to pay for the $10 million of subway improvements. I mean, that's the quid pro quo. The issue is now, okay, we're going ahead and doing condominiums. We went back, we asked our brokers, oh, what's the market out there? Well, he said, well, rentals, the minimum height is 9 feet. And in Soho, for condos, the ceiling heights are either 10, 11, 13 feet. At the very minimum, the entire city is 10 feet. Now, given that we are on the busiest, most traffic, noisiest intersection in the city, this location has its challenges above the subway, sharing amenities with the rental part of the building. So there is a 10-foot ceiling at the bare minimum, barely makes this particular unit or condo marketable. So with that, thank you for consideration, and thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have questions? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Jefferson.
So the issue of facades. Facades are to be read architecturally. Typically, when you look at a facade, you could see where the living room is, you could see where the bathroom is. It tells a story of the building. Now, your building has these floors that are different heights that also tell a story. It tells a story of affordable buildings, affordable floors that are 10 feet high, but condos are 12 feet high. And that tells a story about our time, our place, our moment. And I don't see why you can't have them all the same height.
Was that a question?
I think again, it just comes down, I think we would love to regularize all of the floors, but it really comes down to what the marketability is. So if we want to lower the overall height of the building, we kind of have to see what is the metric to do that. Ideally, then therefore the condo condition, which is more of the driver, is the stronger framework of the 10-foot minimums, then we would increase them all to 10 feet. But that's not the goal here. So the goal is to try to reduce. So, sure.
Commissioner Jefferson, you have to speak into the mic, sorry. If you could speak into the microphone.
Asking yourself, why not just make them all 12 floors, 12 floor to floor height, 12 feet? And that would solve the problem.
Yeah, I think I guess I don't disagree. I think that would just make the building taller, which is sort of we're certainly compromising the architecture for the balance of making the building affordable to build, making it appropriate in the district, and making it marketable for the breakdown. So it is a bit of a balance, and it does end up compromising minorly. We do feel though that some of these views, it's not, certainly from here, it's not as readily visible from the street. That would be my response.
You can simply see, especially the way you have the facade getting thinner as it goes up, the height of the floors clearly. I think give it some thought, of trying to keep it lower, take out a floor perhaps, but keep everything the same height.
Okay, questions, commissioners? Okay, yes. Not seeing any other questions. I do want to note that we received some testimony after the June 23rd hearing, which was shared by commissioners in advance of this meeting. And Manhattan Borough President Brad Hoylman Siegel recommended approval. The MTA recommended approval. Victorian Society of New York recommended denial, and 3 individuals recommended denial. So I'm going to start with a few comments and some summaries of the discussion that we had. So this is a proposal, as you know, for an 18-story addition to a 3-story building. And in 2023, the Commission approved a 9-story plus penthouse addition to the building. And as you've heard, this is a unique site in terms of transit issues, and that it has the subway lines running directly underneath the building, and platform entries directly into the building. And as we've heard, MTA designated this as a high priority site to improve accessibility, and the applicant is taking advantage of the Zoning for Accessibility program, which is a citywide program to promote subway accessibility. The site also is unique in that it fronts 2 wide streets, Broadway and Canal, both of which have taller buildings, changes of scale, and a variety that are different from some of the smaller streets in the Soho districts. And that's something that most commissioners noted in the last hearing. In addition, Soho is a district that can be dramatic in terms of differences of scale between adjacent buildings and buildings on the block. So that is another factor to consider. Oops. My mouse is going nuts here. And at the last hearing, commissioners all agreed that a taller tower addition to the 3-story historic building is acceptable. And the comments were largely positive about the overall proposal and the transit improvements, and positive about the storefront infill and signage master plan. And that was unchanged from the prior approval. Many commissioners asked for further explanation on the appropriateness of the building, given its height. And many commissioners found that the proposed height, given the location on 2 wide streets, to be appropriate. However, most commissioners recommend that the floor-to-floor heights be consistent to lower the overall height of the building. There were some design recommendations. Several commented on how it accentuated the verticality and questioned that approach. The applicant has come back, and they have been responsive to many of the commissioners' suggestions, including reducing the overall height by lowering the floor-to-floor height of most of the floors, although it's not consistent, as we've heard, and adjusting the transition of brick to terracotta at the piers to help de-emphasize the verticality of the facades. And came back also with a justification, a stronger justification for the appropriateness. So with that, let's start our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, you started last time, and at that time you found the height and scale to be appropriate because of the location on Canal and Broadway, these 2 wide streets, and had other comments related to the design in particular and regularizing the floor-to-floor heights.
Thank you. Okay. Very interesting presentation, very professional and thorough. And I want to start by saying I think that the overall project is an appropriate one. Some suggestions for how to make it better that I think we should consider. But I want to start with the analysis, right? Erin did a very thorough job, as usual, in presenting different strategies for how to think about why this project would be appropriate. And it struck me that as I was listening to her go through those strategies, that some of them really struck me as really bad ideas, and some of them struck me as okay ideas. And I thought that that's because, you know, what we do is to kind of use these arguments as rationales for finding something appropriate or inappropriate. I think that the strategies used, we'll see them again. And I think it's important to kind of, think about them, or for me anyway, to think about them and think about, is this an appropriate way to look at a new building or a modification of the landmark district? I think that the idea of looking at the proportional relationships as a percentage from building to building is a terrible idea. And I think it runs against long-standing LPC practice of not using kind of ratios as a basis, but using heights as a basis. And I think that that's something that I'd feel uncomfortable letting go of, because it could really just, you can use that kind of math to kind of do all kinds of very exponential changes that I don't think would be contextual in the normal sense of that word, or as it's been developed over the last 50 years. So I think that's a bad argument. I think that the zoning argument, that zoning changes, therefore it's all good, I think that too is a no. I mean, I think one of the essences of landmarks as a regulatory body in the city is that it gets to go against zoning, right? I mean, you could tear down much of Brooklyn Heights and put up very tall buildings. I don't think that would be something that we would consider appropriate. And that's because we get to say no to zoning. And we use a different standard. And I think that is a good thing. So I think that as an argument is not a good argument. I think that the argument about looking outside of an LPC district for context is a good argument. I think that the city is not experienced by people as this is one place, this is another. You move through it organically, and I think that kind of analysis is reasonable when when it makes sense, when it makes sense from an experiential perspective, that it's going to reinforce the context in the historic district. The most compelling argument that she made for me was that this particular site is a special condition. It is a very unusual site. Canal Street is very variegated, and Broadway is very varied as well. Although her Broadway corridor analysis would really tell us that it would be inappropriate to put a building like this here because most of the taller buildings are to the north on Broadway. Not all of them, but most of them. But the special conditions is enough for me, I think. I think that the argument that this is an unusual site because of the two important streets intersecting, because of the width of those streets and how they're experienced, and because of the broader cityscape that you experience at that place as being very varied, supports this building at this height. I do think that the height differential as you go up from the rental piece to the condo piece is perceptible, and it kind of works against the kind of forced perspective that they're trying to do with the tapering brick, right? The tapering brick is meant to kind of be to draw your eye up and to make it seem even taller than it might be. It's an elongator visually, and what the windows growing on the upper floors does is it kind of squishes it down. It makes it heavier feeling in a way. And I think that you could solve the problem. I mean, they brought the building down from 230 something, right? 230 foot 3, right? No, yeah, 232.9, excuse me, from 232.9 to 220 foot 3. And if you took all the rentals who have to suffer now under 9-foot ceilings and gave them the 10-foot ceilings that the plutocrats up above get, I think that you would have a regular building, and it would still be less than the 232 foot 9 that we saw last time. And since most people, I think, were okay with the general height last time, you could solve the problem and regularize the floors without exceeding and still getting a somewhat more modest reduction in height, unless my math is wrong. I still think that the tapering detail, the limestone, works against the simplicity and solidity of the base. I think the base is a very strong building. It's very unusual in the district. And I think that to the degree that this feels kind of, it doesn't sit as nicely on the base as it could, because of that, I personally think that the tapering detail is not, it's interesting architecturally, but I don't think it's successful in marrying the base to the shaft. And I also think that the arches below the crown piece feel peculiar. It's imitating buildings, or it's recalling buildings of that 1880s to 19-teens phase. And I think that the arches diminish the importance of the crown piece and can feel confusing to me. And one of the reasons that kind of cemented that for me was when I look at the brickwork on the side of the building, like the party walls, that to me looks much simpler and cleaner and straightforward. Obviously, it doesn't have windows or anything, but just as a kind of a gross diagram, I think that that lower tier of arches is a mistake. But I think in general, it's a very good project. And I think it's interesting for us to kind of think about, how do we accommodate the new zoning? How do we accommodate what's clearly an imperative of all cities, and certainly of New York, to have more bulk, to have more housing in a historically appropriate context? And I think that the argument about this special location being able to accommodate an extraordinarily tall building, even though it doesn't meet our usual standards for height analysis, et cetera, I think I can accept that here.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, previously you'd said you'd found the height appropriate, but did recommend regularizing the floor-to-floor heights.
And I'm going to go through some of this. In general, On the overall, I agree with Commissioner Goldblum. I think he's talked about the uniqueness, first of all, of the two wide streets. I think the subway location is also important. Creating subway access is difficult in a built-up city, and this is a site that allows to do that. And the city has said, if you do that, we'll give you a zoning bonus to pay for what they're saying is $10 million of subway improvements. And as both the MTA and the community board noted, this is important and makes this an unusual site for other reasons. I also want to note, and I was thinking about, as an architect, I probably look up more than the average person. But when I'm walking down the street, I'm looking at the streetscape. I'm not looking, oh, that's a 20-story building. Oh, that's a 5-story building. I tend not to notice that. And I will look, Everardo's looking at me questioningly. I will look up and notice it. But my point is, as I walk through the city, I'm not always saying, oh, that's a tall building. I'm looking at the streetscape and the activity. I think this design is good. I think if we are concerned about the variation in floor-to-floor height, doesn't seem to be that big an issue to me, but I agree with Commissioner Goldblum and the issue that Commissioner Jefferson raised. If we want to do anything, we should raise the rentals so they're all the same height, because adding that extra height will be imperceptible from the street and will solve that concern. And some of the detail of, I can find the existing details fine. Maybe the first set of arches shouldn't be arches. That could be something that's reviewed with staff. But in general, I find this appropriate and will create subway access, more housing for the city in a way that I find fits in with the historic district.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I think I agree with both my fellow commissioners. And in terms of the facade itself, I do agree that the arches lower level required, the arches on the top, on the crown, makes the building much more, adds to the building in terms of the facade. I think it's a nice building. I think it's, and I think we are lucky in this particular case, because it was approved at a certain height, then it increased maybe. But because it's at the corner, it ameliorates the issues of scale, and I can accept it. If it was in the middle of the block, it would be another issue. So I can approve this. If the rentable apartments are all made the same scale. If the floor-to-floor height remained the same for all the apartments.
Vice Chair Master.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank Erin. I had asked you for some justification. For me, the big issue here was the height of the building, and I think you spent a lot of time talking about that, and I really appreciate that. So for me, in terms of the design and the materiality of the building, I can find it appropriate. I think it's well designed. I know that the issue came up about regularizing the floors, and it seems important to some of the commissioners. So I agree that if we regularize the floors, I would be willing to sacrifice a little bit more height. So in terms of the question that that was asked, and I think Erin asked it well, does this extraordinary height of this building, does it disturb or hurt the historic district, or does it contribute to the dynamism and evolution of the district? And I paid a lot of attention to Aaron's arguments. And in general, I agree with the other commissioners. I think that there are very site-specific reasons that this site can accommodate a much taller building. First of all, even though there isn't a taller building in the historic district itself, in the surrounding blocks, including on the same block, there's a new building going up that's taller. And then there's another building, 401 Broadway, that is taller as well. And I think we have to look at it in the context of the neighborhood instead of being historic district specific. In addition, we have mentioned that Broadway and Canal are very wide streets and can accommodate a taller building. It is a corner building on Broadway, which means that it can be significantly taller. And of course, there's the fact that transit hubs also can accommodate taller buildings, typically in the city. So all those reasons to me indicate that a taller building can be justified here. I know that Commissioner Goldblum poo-pooed the juxtaposition argument. And I don't think that the juxtaposition argument in itself would say that this is appropriate. However, I think it's important to keep it in mind because it does mean that within this historic district, we have a high variety of heights, and that in itself supplements the fact that we can justify something that is very tall here, even though the surrounding buildings, adjacent buildings might be lower, because that is a condition as she has shown on Broadway. So for all those reasons, and I just want to say that the final reason that I really, for me, that was kind of weighing to support this very unique situation of approving this tall building is something that Aaron had said before, which is very compelling to me, that it's meeting the city's needs at this time. And I think that's important for us at LPC to acknowledge the times that we're living in and also helping to meet what is a very important need, which is housing, and that we shouldn't stand in the way of that, and that when it's appropriate, and if we can find justification, and in this particular incident, in this particular case, I think that Aaron and you guys have made the argument that it is appropriate for us to approve this tall building. And so, you guys have done a very good job in making this case, and I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Ikembe, last time you talked, you said you were okay with the taller building, but wanted to see the floor-to-floor heights regularized and also better justification on appropriateness.
I guess still I'd like to see the floors regularized. But I guess what I'd like to thank the applicant for is for the bombardment of actual vantage points of actually looking at this project. I think it's good because it got my wheels going. And to complement that, also the written testimony that was provided as well. It really made me think about what is being proposed here. And after going through the rigor, as I said before, I do believe a taller building is acceptable on this site. And I believe it was further cemented by actually just looking at the site specificness of this space and then also of the needs that it's going to meet. Because of that, I'm willing to sacrifice a taller building because it does serve a greater purpose, in which Angie has said quite eloquently that it's actually helping to serve the needs of the city. That being the case, I do find it appropriate. The additional comments I would have to be in its aesthetic. I agree that the rounded arches at the top of the shaft, they may need to be relooked at and possibly eliminated. And also to pay attention of the verticality of the of the shaft detailing as well. I don't know if it's the most appropriate way to try to simplify the building in the site. But again, it is a great project, and I'd like to thank you all for presenting it.
Great. Thank you for that. And Commissioner Wilder, you had said you thought there needed to be a better justification of the appropriateness and question again the verticality of the design.
Yeah, I think between the presentation and the commissioner's comments has been a little bit of a roller coaster, and how I've thought about this this building and my response. I agree with I'm glad Commissioner Goble made the point. I think I appreciate the analysis with the juxtaposition. I think overall it helped, but not for the reasons that I think you intended. Because while looking through it and listening to it, I just kept saying, I don't see the height of each building, right? It was lacking information in terms of ratio was there, but I didn't see the numbers. And I think there was, when you got to the elevations, you did show the numbers. And then what actually clicked was, it's not necessarily the percentage, but more so the juxtaposition and what's actually happening as it's just jogging from taller to shorter, which gave me a little more appreciation of district and finding ways to justify the height here. So I think I've come around to the height. I appreciate the effort to bring it down a little bit more than a story. 12 feet, I think, is the number. I can see the difference in height. I don't know if it's because I was told and I'm looking at it, but I can see it. I also don't know if I'm seeing it from the street level, but I think the safer way to go is to regularize them in some manner. Maybe that can be studied. I liked I found the tapering intriguing before. I think you did improve upon it this time. And if we're talking about the arches at the top of the shaft, although I don't think it fully works with at the top of the crown, I do think they're necessary for the tapping of this tapering concept. I don't know what it would look like if they weren't there. I don't think it would work well. And so for that reason, I think it's okay and it's acceptable. And yeah, I do want to give credit because it is a complex project with various things that were brought up during the presentation. So I think overall, I think we all feel that it's a good project, and I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mahan, you had asked for a better justification of the appropriateness of a building of this scale and height and expressed some that you weren't comfortable with the height and scale and had some questions about the design and emphasizing verticality.
Thank you. Get to go last, so I'll feel guilty if I'm long-winded. And I also have guilt for asking for those justifications and making Aaron speak at length as well. I do feel that was partially my fault. That being said, I'll just go through it. So I think that the starting with the building and the architecture itself, I think that the floor-to-floor height reduction is good. I think it's notable and meaningful. I think it does change meaningfully the scale of the building. You know, my recollection, was that there were a number of commissioners uncomfortable with the height. I would not support adding a foot to every rental floor. I think that the change, from sorry, I was talking about two different things. The reduction in floor-to-floor height across the whole building to change the total height is positive and notable. And my recollection is that there was a level of discomfort, with a number of commissioners about the overall height and scale. Speaking about the change within the building between the rental and condo units, I think it's subtle, and I can see it if I look for it, but I think it's subtle, and I think that the addition, as proposed, of an additional foot to each of the rental floors would be harmful to the height and scale of the building in total. I personally would not support that. I've in my own practice have worked on many tall residential buildings. The applicant is absolutely correct in their analysis of the different market demands between rental and condo. 9-foot and 10-foot clear are quite standard. So many residential buildings are done this way. This is typical. Okay. The gradient on the facade, I think the reduction in the length of the gradient is positive because it reduces the vertical emphasis of the building. I agree with Commissioner Goldblum that I'm not sure it's really necessary. It's an interesting architectural, characteristic. Personally, as I noted last time, I find it a little bit curious to deploy it at this project because it seems to work against the challenges relative to the height of this particular project. But I think its reduction in the proposal is fine, and I'm okay with it. I'm also okay with the arches at the top of the shaft, which some other commissioners commented on positively or negatively. What I really wanted to get to, though, was the sort of detailed urban analysis in an effort to make an argument for appropriateness. I very much appreciated this. I thought that it was very helpful. I thought that it was very necessary for a project of this scale and magnitude, for a project responding to, a significant change in zoning. The public hearing presentation focused much more exclusively on the architectural devices that we use as tools for appropriateness. However, those cannot only be sort of self-referential; they can only be found appropriate in how they relate to the context. And so, I really appreciate the level of sophistication that this team brought and the level of scholarship that was brought to this argument. I actually think it's quite necessary to carry the day for a project of this magnitude and complexity. I found the abrupt changes in height, the juxtaposition, to be meaningful and notable. I think it is important. It is a characteristic of these two streets. I think I went and walked around, these two streets recently after the public hearing to get the feeling for the energy. And I think, the energy of the people and the commerce that occurs here is reinforced by the kind of surprise, juxtaposition, the kind of jumble of architectural scale and style. I think those things mutually reinforce one another. I agree with Commissioner Goldblum about the metrics, the devices, but I think the underlying, ideas is completely sound and important. I think The fact that these are both wide streets is important. The fact that taller buildings occur at corners is important. I think the proportions are notable. Particularly helpful was 458 Broadway, which has proportions similar to this particular building. I wanted to call out the historic Broadway photo and the street elevations. Amazing. A great level of scholarship and clear argument for the appropriateness of this abrupt change in scale. It looked just like it does today. In closing, I completely agree with Commissioner Goldblum again that, our remit is narrow analyzing appropriateness. But this is a project that reminds me how somehow I'm always amazed that preservation becomes the kind of locus and expression for a whole host of sort of social and community issues, and they are the context, the background against which we are measuring appropriateness, local community concerns, including identity and change and historical continuity in our management of change, changing construction technologies, as the applicant talked about, civic needs such as housing, as they're expressed through zoning and finance, and even Aaron's shock that shopping is not as of right in Soho, all found expression in this project. So I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. So Commissioner Goldblum, I think we can make a motion. I think we have a majority of commissioners who felt that regularizing the floor-to-floor heights was more important than the reduction of the overall height. And with one commissioner being an exception, who thought that the reduction in height was very meaningful. So I think if that's the majority, then that's probably the way to go with that direction. And Corey, am I missing another to work with the staff on
on
that?
the other stuff.
On the other stuff.
I think we can continue to explore if the programming changes or anything of that nature, and there is the opportunity for any further reductions. Certainly, we'd be open to that and could work with the applicant. But again, I think as
Another way to make it regular, by the way, not that I think that they would do it, is if you interspersed rental, condo, it would be very uniform.
Yeah, I would suggest we go to approve it as the majority suggested, and then if there were opportunities for minor adjustments, we would go along with that as well.
All right. So this is bad feedback. Am I doing height for sure or work with staff?
Yeah, I think it's an approval with modifications. The first modification being to make the floor to ceiling heights consistent by raising the rental floors to match the reduced heights as currently shown for the condo floors, and then to, let's say, study the retention or deletion of the lower arches and how they interact with the tapering with staff.
Got it. Regarding 277 Canal Street, also known as 277-289 Canal, 418-422 Broadway, so cast iron historic district extension, the application is to construct a vertical enlargement and establish a master plan governing the installation of storefront infill and signage. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. I also note that the buildings within the Soho Cast Iron Historic District and its extension reflect shifting waves of development, evolving from residential to entertainment, manufacturing and storage, utilitarian and support uses, and back to residential, and that the district experienced a period of stagnation and decay, with little new construction occurring during the early to mid-1900s, at which time this building was constructed. Furthermore, I note that some buildings such as 525, 565 Broadway were vertically extended in the late 1800s and early 1900s as transportation improvements were made to the surrounding area, and that the additional stories were constructed in plane with the original building base and designed to be an integral part of the facade. Additionally, I note that the public meeting of October 31, 2023 The commission approved a new 9-story plus penthouse vertical enlargement of this property. However, no permits have yet been issued for that project. Finally, I note that a thorough restoration of the historic building facades will be reviewed at a staff level. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the existing 3-story building dating to the late 1920s is not representative of a key period of significance of the historic district, primarily represented by its 19th century cast iron store and loft buildings. That this simply designed building was originally built as a theater, a use that does not relate to the commercial and manufacturing history of the district, and that its height does not define its typology. Therefore, constructing a large vertical addition will not detract from the architectural style of the building or of the special historic and architectural character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District extension. That there is a historic precedent in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District and its extension for the vertical building extensions constructed in plane with the original building base and designed to be an integral part of the facade. The Broadway and Canal streets are wider than other streets within the historic district and feature corner buildings which are often notably larger than the buildings found on the side streets, and that the existing building features a larger lot area and longer street frontages than the typical lots in the district. Therefore, total building height could fit well with the overall scale of the streetscapes. But there is historic precedent throughout the city for buildings featuring entrances to major subway hubs being taller than surrounding buildings. Therefore, a taller building at this location, which includes entrance to multiple subway lines, will continue this typology. That significant juxtaposition of buildings with differing heights is a condition found in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District and extension, particularly along Broadway. That the composition of the vertical extension set upon the existing building as a base with a taller middle shaft featuring tripartite window bays with spandrel panels at each floor and a 3-story crown and cornice reflects the typical composition of other tall masonry buildings within the historic district, and the historic building at the base will remain legible. That the materials palette featuring aluminum windows, spandrel panels, tapered red brick, and white terracotta masonry piers, and white terracotta at cornices and cladding at the top floors will complement the materials at the existing building and will harmonize the neighboring buildings and buildings throughout the district while contributing to the building's contemporary design. That the building's fenestration, featuring tripartite assemblies of single height fixed encasement windows with single horizontal mullions separated by major vertical masonry piers, emphasizes the verticality of the facade and relates to the tripartite configuration of window bay widths at the existing building. That the use of back-painted glass and interior shadow boxes at select windows throughout the vertical extension will not be readily perceptible from the public thoroughfare. That the repetitive arch motif at the crown ties to the arch at the historic building entrance and reflects the typical termination detail at other historic buildings in the district while incorporating a modern dimensional fold to add shadowing and texture. That the north and east facade lot line facades featuring 2-tone brick cladding in a large arched pattern, control joints, and rooftop bulkheads with brick cladding add articulation to the blank walls, recall the detailing of the primary facades while remaining secondary and subservient, and that the materials and finishes are typical of large exposed secondary masonry walls found throughout the district. That the partially visible rooftop accretions will not call into attention to themselves, and the neutral matte gray finish will allow them to recede from view against the backdrop of the sky. That the decorative urns at the pedimented entrance on Canal Street will be retained and modified to engage with the vertical extensions, thereby preserving these significant architectural features. That the Commission previously approved demolition of the interior floors and lot line walls of the historic existing building in an earlier proposal, and that this work is necessary to install a new concrete structure to support the vertical extension will be designed and built in compliance with DOB regulations under the supervision of a licensed engineer to protect the facades and adjacent buildings. That the proposed replacement windows at the second and third floors of the existing building featuring tripartite aluminum assemblies with fixed encasement single light windows and transoms with bronze finish will match the configuration of the original windows and will recall the original vertical pivot operation while accounting for interior structural constraints, and will help to unify the lower facades with the new tower above. That the removal of modern cladding, signage, and storefront infill from the existing building will eliminate unsympathetic alterations that detract from the significant architectural features of the building and will restore the height and width of the historic storefront bays and placement of terracotta piers, thereby bringing the facade closer to its historic appearance. That the establishment of a master plan governing the future installation of storefront infill and signage will allow for the flexibility while promoting consistency by defining infill configurations and types, locations, sizes, and materials for signage at all facades. That the design and finish of the proposed aluminum storefront infill featuring tripartite display windows with paneled bulkheads and metal mesh transoms and paired glass and aluminum doors, all with a bronze finish, will relate to the configuration of other windows at the existing building and vertical extensions and help unify the facade, recall for configuration and proportions of typical historic storefront infill in a contemporary manner. That there is a historic precedent for large signs and a variety of sign and illumination types at buildings along Canal Street, a highly commercial thoroughfare. Therefore, the presence of multiple large halo-lit and externally illuminated and internally illuminated storefront signs will not detract from the streetscape views and will reinforce the relationship of the building to its site. That the replacing of two existing building identification signs, the Old Tarsh building at the third floor, will be limited to the building identification only and will feature pin-mounted letters to reflect the historic signs. That the proposed relocation of the modified historic recessed subway entrance at the Broadway facade of the building base will facilitate MTA-required barrier-free access improvements to the train platforms from the street level. And the placement of the marquee with signage at the Canal Street entrance recalls the historic movie theater marquee present in the 1920s and will retain the original facade tiebacks and bronze finished aluminum cladding will harmonize with other building materials. However, I recommend that the applicant work with staff to first regularize the floor-to-floor heights by adding dimension to the rental floors, if that's the solution that everyone, that staff and the applicant can find.
To match the modified.
The goal is to modify them to create a uniformity of the entire facade. And the applicant can explore with the staff possible modifications to the design of the tapering terracotta and arches at the top of the shaft element.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, can you second the motion?
So second.
And Mark, can you call the vote?
Chair Savage,
Aye.
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. That's been approved. Please continue to work with staff.
All right, we'll now move to the next item. It's public meeting item number 3, LPC 26-05571. An application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 922, Lot 1.
Always work.
250 Second Avenue in the Stuyvesant Square Park Historic District. This is Stuyvesant Square Park, a public park originally designed in the 1840s and redesigned by Gilmore D. Clark in 1937, including a restroom building built in 1937. The application is to replace and modify planting areas, fencing, pathways, and paving, replace windows and install security grates, and regrade a section of the park. This was last presented at the public hearing of March 24th, 2026. No action was taken at that time. The applicants will present revisions to the proposal in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Good morning. So let's go ahead and open the proceedings. Commissioner Wilder, can you make a vote to open the proceedings?
Moved.
Sorry, I've lost my little script here. Commissioner Ginsburg, can you second the motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the proceedings are open and you can begin.
Good morning. I'm Sybil Young with New York City Parks, here to present a revised design for modifications at Stuyvesant Square East. The overall goal of this project is to restore and reopen an existing public restroom building and to provide barrier-free access to the restroom. As noted, we presented this in March. We heard some very helpful feedback and now have some adjustments to our plan to share with you. Just a reminder, the design evolution of this park, it opened in 1850 and was redesigned in the 1930s. And that 1930s design is pretty much what is there today. The red dot on our plan represents that mature elm tree, which we discussed at length at the last public hearing. So our existing conditions in the upper left is that public restroom building that has steps leading up to it. The paths are all asphalt hex block. That center yellow area is a very popular dog run. Around the perimeter or outer paths, we have concrete base benches, our type B bench. And then within the inner areas of the park is the 1939 World's Fair benches. And then that red dot again is that tree that's planted in the middle of the path. Here are some images of our public restroom and the tree in the path. So as we discussed at the public hearing, it's not possible to make this path accessible without removing this tree, which is not something we'd consider for a variety of reasons, especially its significant environmental benefits. But the roots of the tree extend about 25 feet from the center of the tree and are heaving the pavement, causing a dangerous condition and one that is impassable really for someone with mobility issues. And just to note, we've been working very closely with our parks arborists who are really experts in urban tree health. So a view of the dog run on the left and then an image looking south toward the public restroom. This was the plan that we presented back in March and a brief summary of the feedback that we received. We were proposing to cut off this path entirely and expand the planting bed for the health of the tree and also to remove the dangerous walking conditions. We are proposing sloped walkways to provide barrier-free access to the public restroom building, and then installing 2 new light poles to illuminate those paths. We were also proposing to remove 1939 World's Fair benches from the inner curves and replace them with the type B bench, which typically are along the outer paths of the park. So the feedback we heard was related to concerns about what cutting that path off does to the symmetry and circulation of the park. There was concern about changing the 1939 World's Fair benches for a different bench type at the center, as that would be inconsistent with the historic design. And then we were asked to look more closely at our design for the proposed 2 new light poles. Sorry, went the wrong way. Okay, so this is our revised plan. We are no longer proposing to completely remove this path, but we are proposing to preserve the curbs in place and remove only the hex block from the center. We are no longer proposing to replace the 1939 World's Fair benches with a different bench type. And we are also proposing to restore and salvage 7 of the existing 1939 World's Fair benches. We also did look a little more closely at the lighting within the park, and I'll share more information on that in a later slide. So starting with the first comment about the symmetry and circulation, again, we will be preserving the curbs of the existing path in place. Within where there was the hex block that we will be removing, we propose to plant a low ground cover with taller vegetation in the planting beds around to preserve that path-like appearance. Oh, sorry, one other thing I should mention is where there was a connecting path, we are proposing to install granite block The reason for that is we don't want to have to extend the curb and do more excavation, which could be damaging to the tree root. Granite block already exists in the park, and also we want to keep this solution as reversible as possible. Here is existing and proposed. We do need to keep this area fenced off still, as we don't want to encourage people to walk over the tree roots and compact the soil around the tree roots. But I think this image also speaks to the fact that this tree, again, is not going to live forever. And when it does die, this fencing can be removed, the asphalt hex block can be returned, and the path fully restored. Another image looking south. And our planting plan, so within the path area, we are proposing a low ground cover shown here on the upper left, and then within the planting beds will be taller plants to differentiate and maintain that path-like appearance. And now regarding the benches, we are going to be using all 1939 World's Fair benches within the inner paths, no longer proposing a new bench type, and preserving and salvaging 7 benches. After the hearing, we did a real deep dive on our 1939 World's Fair benches. We surveyed all of the benches within the project area. We also reached out to the original manufacturer and still current manufacturer of the 1939 World's Fair benches, trying to determine if there was a difference between the original design and what our current 1939 World's Fair bench standard is. So the World's Fair bench was designed in 1936, and then in the 1980s, the design was slightly modified at the rear, really to strengthen the connection between the base and the slats. And that was really the only change that we found between the 1936 and then the 1980s design, which we're currently using today. Just some original drawings, the 1936 design and the 1980s design, which is our current standard. The overall dimensions and detailing remain the same. So within the dog run, we were proposing to change the bench type to the concrete-based bench. And the reason for that was that we had heard from the dog run people that dogs were getting their paws caught between the 2 front slats. So we're now proposing to modify that front slat so that we minimize that gap, and can see in the image, even the tiniest of paws will be safe, and we can keep our historic bench type. And the third comment we received was about the lighting. So we did survey all of the lighting within the park, all of the light poles and luminaires. And what we found was all of the light poles are what we call our type B light pole, which are these 3 poles shown on the right, with the exception of 3, which are the type E pole. The type E pole was likely original to the park, and there are 3 of those that remain. The type E pole is no longer readily available. All of the luminaires have been changed to modern luminaires, and they're all this type, which is a design from the 1960s, with the exception of 2, which utilize the Riverside luminaire. And the Riverside luminaire is typically what we use in our historic parks. It's what the commission has approved in many of our historic parks. So our proposal is for the 2 new poles, is to utilize the type B pole with the Riverside luminaire. While there are only 2 of the Riverside luminaire, it is our hope and plan that as these are replaced in the future, we will have them replaced with the Riverside luminaire, as this is a more appropriate design for a historic park. We did investigate having a custom casting done of the type E pole, but it was a bit beyond the project budget. In addition, our lighting in parks is all maintained by DOT, and in order to utilize a custom pole, we have to get special permission. So We think considering the type B pole is the predominant pole throughout the park, that it is an appropriate choice for our two new poles. And this is our final slide with the revised plan. Happy to answer questions, and we have our landscape architects and architects here as well. So,
Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you. I do want to note that we received submitted testimony that was shared with the commissioners in advance of the meeting. We heard from Historic Districts Council, who made some recommendations, Victorian Society of New York, recommending denial of this, and one individual expressing concern for the central elm tree. So in this application, for various modifications to the Stuyvesant Square Park, at the hearing, commissioners, I think, appreciated the complexity of balancing ADA access and the various needs of park users, and also preserving the large elm tree. And the recommendations were to preserve as much of the historic material as possible, including the benches and lampposts. And I think most particularly to find a way to preserve more of the park's symmetry, and, addressing, how to save some memory of that curved pathway. I'm going to start with commissioners who were here. Commissioner Ikembe, if you could start, please.
Yes. Yes, first of all, I'm going to say it's a very interesting idea to maintain the path as a landscaped area. I think that's a very interesting and nice touch. And not only does it preserve the tree, but it's also reversible, as you stated, as the potential when the tree is no longer with us. For the other modifications, I think the use of the light poles, I think is very clear. It's clean. It helps unify the entire park. And I enjoy the plan of actually being able to change the other luminaires as time proceeds. And of course, the benches, it's good to see that the 1939 benches will be either restored or where they can't to be replaced in kind. Overall, I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder.
Yeah, thanks, the applicant for coming back and that's to preserve as many of the details that we thought were important before. And I do agree that I think it was a clever idea to have concrete curb. Does work, especially for such a unique challenge that you guys had to deal with, and serve as many benches and like both are a great idea. So yeah, I can find it appropriate.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Mahan.
Yeah, I concur. Don't have anything else to add.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's generally moving in the right direction. I think the retention and restoration of the benches is great, and the use of keeping the bench design uniform and consistent with the historical condition is important. I think that the retention of the ghosting of the path is good. I would suggest if they could explore the possibility of taking that a little bit further. The fencing, I think, is a very strong element in how people experience the space. Could they continue the fencing along the path line? Could they change the fence where the path, where the ghost path is, so that there was some indication of the paths kind of visually continuing, even if you can't walk there? I think that, looking at how the ramp element intersects with the center pathway, I would just say think through how you want this to look when you make it paved. and make it as close to that as possible. But I think this approach is a very good first step.
Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with my fellow commissioner. I think the idea of memory restoration is a conceptually good approach for this park.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
I agree. I think this is really good. I would leave the ghost path as is for now. Adding more fence or so on doesn't seem to me to be particularly appropriate. And if at some point in the distant future, or when in the distant future, the tree passes, that path can be restored. But keeping the remnants by keeping the curb seems to me a really good solution, and I can find this appropriate.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Master, I don't think you were here at the first one, but
No, I wasn't here. I can accept this as presented. I can find it appropriate. I just want to say that I'm really happy as a dog lover that you guys reached out and found that the paws could potentially get stuck in the bench. I think that's very important, especially given that there's a dog run there. So I commend you for doing that.
and Commissioner Chen.
I echo the vice chair sentiment. One good thing about this is the paws won't get caught anymore. But I also concur with, I think it's very clear, and I'm commend the Parks Department for, keeping the memories alive of the World's Fair benches and in the improved version. The one comment that I agree with Commissioner Goldblum is, I think, and as I felt Commissioner Ginsburg as well, is the fencing. I think the fencing could be worked on. I think somehow it just pop out, and I think if there's another better way to treat it, I think we should explore it.
Great. So Commissioner Kwambe, I think that you could read a motion and add that the applicant should work with staff on the fencing or explore.
Fence with the implied path. I think work with staff to explore the interaction with fencing and the implied path and the landscape.
In the matter of LPC 26-05571, 250 Second Avenue, Stuyvesant Square Park, Stuyvesant Square Historic District, a public park originally designed in the 1840s and redesigned by Gilmore D. Clark in 1937, including a restroom building built in 1937. This application is to replace and modify planting areas, fencings, pathways, and pavings, replace windows, and install security grates, and regrade a section of the park. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will help improve barrier-free access and circulation, address safety hazards, protect a mature tree, and enhance the public's experience within the southern section of the park. That the removal of paving at the southwest curved portion of the perimeter park path and installation of the low metal fencing across the access points will support the longevity of an existing mature elm tree, which likely predates the path and will be easily reversible after the tree's eventual demise. That the proposed planting scheme, retaining the concrete curb from the main curved path to be removed and adding granite curbs at access points to be closed, will help maintain a sense of a historic curved path and support the unity and symmetry of the historic design. That the proposed gray tinted concrete barrier-free access paths will be placed at the edge of the park and will be short, connecting the historic paths in a simple way with the material that blends harmoniously with the adjoining historic asphalt hex block paving. That the combination of the removal of curb sections of the perimeter path created of the two barrier-free access paths and shiftings of the two existing paths connecting the plaza to the perimeter path will help maintain the overall sense of symmetry and unity of the park design and circulation. That the creation of the proposed curved planting beds will provide a modestly scaled buffer at the edge of the dog run with only the removal of a small percentage of the existing granite block pavers and will correspond to landscaping within the equivalent areas at the northern end of the park. That the proposed smooth finish Belgian block pavers at the center of the plaza will recall the traditional granite block pavers to be replaced while meeting code requirements for barrier-free access. That the proposed benches will match the historic 1939 World's Fair benches, except for minor deviations in details which will support their stability, longevity, and safety for dogs. That the proposed lampposts will meet DOT requirements, match existing lampposts which have been added to the park over time, and will be similar to the remaining historic lampposts in terms of their basic design, height, and finish. That the proposed 5-foot-tall metal fence and mesh fencing at the picket gates assemblies will replace existing ad hoc fences, feature a simple design with neutral finishes, and correspond to the pathway circulation patterns. That the proposed metal windows and doors at the restroom building will match the historic wooden windows and doors in terms of configuration, operation, finish, and details. And the change in materials will be largely imperceptible. And that the proposed work will not detract from the historic character of the park. I also note that the applicant will work with staff to define the path in conjunction with the proposed fencing.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen, can you second the motion?
Second.
And Mark, can you call the vote?
Chair Savage,
Aye.
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, that's been approved. Please continue work with staff, and thank you. Let's move to the next item.
Right.
Corey?
Next item is public meeting item number 4, LPC 26-03193. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1203, Lot 33, 295 Central Park West in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. This is an art moderne style apartment building designed by Emery Roth & Sons and built in 1940 to 41. The application is to replace a marquee. This was last presented at the public hearing of March 10th, 2026. No action was taken at that time. The applicants will present revisions to the proposal in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Vice Chair Master, can I ask you to make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Wilder, can you second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are open and you can begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Our presentation is a repeat of what we presented last time. We've spent quite a bit of time talking to the members of the building and talking to the ownership and taking the comments back and trying to reconfigure the canopy to fit better within the facade of the building. Okay. Sorry. My name is Joe Sultana. My firm is JLS Designs, and we're out of Bayside, Queens. So this presentation is to remove the existing fabric canopy and replace it with a fixed marquee. From our first presentation, what we did is we started changing the shape of the canopy. The most important thing was the structural components of the marquee. Originally, there were tiebacks that were supporting the marquee back to the building. We've worked with our structural engineer, and now those tiebacks are not structural anymore. The marquee is structural on its own. So tiebacks were placed in a different location. The picture on the left is the original presentation we had, where the tiebacks were going back into the center line of the granite or precast, the precast concrete stone. The one on the right is our new presentation, where we made it a lot narrower, and then we brought those tiebacks in. We also looked at the entire length of the building. That was one of the comments that one of the commissioners came up with, is if we can look at it not just as a single image of the canopy and the linear entrance, but also to look at it along the entire front of the building. And coincidentally, we found a couple things that were interesting when it came back to the design, that the new canopy we're designing is basically almost the same shape as the existing green fabric canopy. And also we're not only just working with the vertical linear of the facade, but now also the horizontal placement of where the windows are and the alignment of the top of the marquee with the existing windows. So what we did is I don't know, it's out of proportion, the pictures, but anyway, we did make it a lot smaller, and it is basically the same size as the existing fabric canopy. We just raised it. We have to raise the bottom of it to 10 feet, like I explained last time. So the top line of this marquee is the same placement where the fabric canopy is. That's the one on the right is the new shape. And these are the two different original and then what we came up with now. I don't know if anybody has any questions about the way it looks. But that's what we're presenting.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Mahan?
What material is the canopy? What material is the
It's
marquee?
right now, currently there's a metal painted door and existing canopy that I presented last time. So if I go back to this picture, back to this drawing here, that area above the door that's dotted, that's the existing canopy that's there now. It's all painted metal. We had it tested to make sure it's not a special metal. It's just the paint. Same color.
Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. We'll move to our discussion. But I will note that we have not received any testimony or comments following the March 10th public hearing. So I just want to note that the commissioners that were present at the last hearing generally supported this proposal in concept. There weren't objections to the materiality or the design. However, they expressed concern about the size and proportion of the marquee, particularly its width in relation to the vertically oriented entrance and to the building overall. So I'm going to, again, start with the commissioners that were here. Commissioner Chen, could you start the discussion?
Yeah, I think that I'm glad that they made changes and improvements. I think the reduction in size and the reduction in width is much more in line with what we suggested. So I can find that appropriate.
Appropriate. It works well with the proportions of the existing graphic pattern.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Great, appropriate.
And Commissioner Wilder, yeah. Yeah, you were here.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate. Good job in the reduction.
Okay, and Commissioner Kemge?
Definitely appropriate. The proportions are much better.
And Vice Chair Master?
Yeah, I remember this. I was here too. You did a great job. It looks great. It's appropriate.
And Commissioner Mann?
I concur.
Okay, great. So Commissioner Chen, could you please read the motion?
Yeah. Delighted to. In the matter of LPC 26-03193, 295 Central Park West, Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. The application is to replace a marquee, noting the building style, scale, materials, and details among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the historic marquee hidden below the existing sidewalk canopy is too small to be effective and is simply designed and smaller in size compared to other marquees at similar buildings designed by the architect. That the proposed marquee will be similar in scale to marquees found at other buildings of this age, type, and style, and will be proportional to the entrance opening and the vertically oriented masonry surround. That the brass finish of the marquee and infill panel will match the material and finish of the historic entrance infill. That the presence of the new infill panel featuring address numbers will reflect the previous location of the historic marquee and the proposed placement of the marquee higher up of the entrance than the location of the historic marquee allows for clearance required by current code. That the simply designed tiebacks anchor at the areas of plain granite will not damage any significant masonry features, that the proposed light fixtures and security cameras will be well integrated into the design of the canopy, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, can you second the motion?
So second.
And Mark, can you call the vote?
Chair Savage,
Aye.
Vice Chair Master, Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg. He's recused. Sorry. Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. That's been approved. Please continue to work with staff. And we are going to move to our public hearing now with the first item, Corey Harala.
Thank you. Public hearing item number 1 is LPC 26-05642, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Staten Island, Block 891, Lot 205, 91 Flagg Court. This is part of the expanded landmark site of the Ernest Flagg House, Gatehouse, and Gate individual landmark. Specifically a garage building designed by Ernest Flagg and built before 1909. The application is to legalize window and roof replacement and installation of metalwork without LPC permits.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John DeLeo. I'm here this morning to seek the Commission's approval to retroactively legalize 3 existing violations on my property located at 91 Flagg Court in Staten Island, New York. I'm just going to start with a brief history timeline. The property was first listed for sale in November of 2023. March 13th, 2024 was the closing date. My attorney and title company completed a title check, which showed no existing liens or violations on the property. In fall of 2024, I reached out to the NYC Landmark Preservation Commission to inquire about constructing a carport on the property's existing driveway. Upon receipt of my inquiry, I was informed that there were 3 existing Department of Building violations on the property. Violations include replacement of roof without LPC approval, replacement of windows without LPC approval, and replacement of ironwork without LPC approval. The violations appear to have been issued on February 9th, 2024, briefly before the closing date. Unfortunately, they were not brought up at closing due to the time they were issued. The violations were quickly issued, and because of this, both the seller and myself were not notified. The LPC has been so far very helpful and explained that these violations could be retroactively legalized. However, I would have to present my case to both the Staten Island Community Board and the LPC Board. This puts me in an unfortunate position as I was not the individual who completed the work. The work was done by the previous owner, I assume. I have not completed any work on the home, nor was I notified about the violations. It was only after I reached out to the LPC that they were brought to my attention. I've since then retracted my initial request for additional work on the home to be done and would like to seek approval to retroactively rectify the violations. Okay, so just to start with the location, the property is located at 91 Flagg Court. It's part of the Ernest Flagg estate in the Toad Hill neighborhood of Staten Island. 91 Flagg was once the carriage house of the Ernest Flagg estate. It is located behind the main mansion, Stone Court, which is located at 209 Flagg Place. So over here is Stone Court, 209 Flagg. This is Flagg Place. Flagg Court is the loop to the rear, and 91 is the corner house. Okay, this is a photo from the 1950s. Alongside the carriage house are other historic landmarks, such as the stables at 79, which is this main house here. Palm House at 63 Flagg Court, and the Gardener's Cottage at 95 Flagg Court. Other nearby landmarks on Flagg Place include Bocott, 285 Flagg Place, Walcott at 95 West Entry Road, and the Flagg Gatehouse at 181 Flagg Place, as well as McCall's Demonstration House at 1929 Richmond Road. So looking at this photo, this is Flagg Court today, and this would be Flagg Place today. And these are just a few old photos. This is the water tower. This is opposite of 91, which is over here. And this is the stable house, 79, which is neighboring the carriage house. You can kind of see it tucked away back here. Okay, in the 1980s, this is the pre-residential condition of the home. It was actually a 3-car garage. During the 1980s, Flagg Court was developed into Copper Flagg Estates, in part by Robert A.M. Stern. The new homes were to be contemporary residences while still taking into consideration Flagg's original designs and choice of building materials. During this period of new development in 1984, before the property was extensively renovated into a single-family home, it was a 3-car garage. In 1989, permits were filed to turn the garage into a single-family home. So this is what the home was in 1984. And then over here, when construction began in 1989, you can kind of see it gutted out over here. Okay, these are just some of the original drawings for the home. Just a few sketches. On the right is what the finished property was supposed to look like. Okay, and that's just a close-up. A few more. Okay, so this is just the streetscape context of the previous condition of the home. Slide shows the previous condition of the home before work was completed. The first photo on the left is from Flagg Court facing north. Second photo on the right is Flagg Court facing west. So the first thing I like to start with is just the roofing. So this is the previous condition of the roofing. This is a wood shingle roof. You can see from the photos, it's rotting and covered in moss as well. It was in desperate need of repair and posed a serious fire risk. So there's a few close-up photos, and then just another photo of the entire roof. So this roof is the replaced roof. It's an asphalt shingle roof. And it is gray in color, more durable than the wood, and is flame resistant, also more easily repaired if damaged. In one of Ernest Flagg's essays on roofing, he praised the shingle roofing for its appearance when laid and overlapped correctly, as well as its exceptional durability and cost effectiveness when compared to a more expensive material such as slate. 10 years after his initial trial, it was reported that there were still no failures with the material. So this is just another picture of the roof facing the home. It's from 2025. And these are a few of the neighboring homes that have similar roofing color and material. So on the left is 285 Flagg Place. That's the Walcott Cottage. And on the right is the Bocott Cottage. That's 95 West Entry Road. So on the left, the Walcott has the fake slate shingle roofing. And on the right, the Bocott house has the asphalt shingle roof. And these are two other homes. That's the McCall's Demonstration House on the left. That's 1929 Richmond Road. That was originally the rolled roofing, which Flagg did not approve of after a few failed tests, and it's now asphalt shingle. And on the right is the gatehouse. That is 181 Flagg Place. That was originally wood shingle, and that was replaced by traditional slate. Okay, so the next item is the windows. So slide 16, it shows the previous condition of the home's windows. They are 10 pane and painted brown. I cannot attest to the material or how they operate, as I've never seen them in person, but only through old photos. So a little hard to see, but they're 10 pane windows, dark brown in color. That's the front of the home. And these are the new windows. So it's the same layout, same color, but the material is a bit different. So slide 17 and the next one, slide 18, they'll show the home's newly installed windows. Just like the old windows, the new windows are also 10 pane. They're outward opening and painted in an identical shade of dark brown. The new windows are part of Marvin's Preserve line, which are a wood and fiberglass clad constructed window. The windows retain the classic look of all wood windows with a wood interior and fiberglass exterior for greater resistance to the elements, increased energy efficiency, and are less likely to rot over time. Notably, the new windows are an energy efficient upgrade. And the next, that's just a few more photos of the newer windows. Okay, the last item is the completed ironwork. So slides 19 and 20 show the newly completed ironwork on the side yard of the home. This is the street view of the ironwork from the street facing north, and alongside on the right is just a close-up of what it looks like. It's a black powder-coated aluminum with pointed finials. The ironwork adds a touch of privacy to otherwise open courtyard on the side of the home. And as you can see from these photos, the ironwork does not connect to the home in any way. It's solely supported by the original fieldstone wall. So on the right, this is where the fencing ends, and it doesn't connect to the side of the home. Okay. Also, too, in Staten Island, we have a lot of native wildlife. Helps to kind of keep them at bay. So we have adult deer, red foxes, raccoons, possums, cats, and groundhogs. They're not afraid to just come right up to your front door. So this kind of helps to just keep them a little further off the property. And the next few slides, they're just going to show ironwork around the historic Flagg estate. So this is ironwork that connects the gatehouse and Bocott residences on Flagg Place. It's like a painted brown. It looks like this. I'm not really sure of the material. Could be steel or aluminum. This is the Bocott cottage. They have the black ironwork and door in the driveway, and also the black fencing in the backyard. And this is another historic property a few doors down. This is 45 Flagg Court. This is the gardener's cottage. They have a similar pointed finial ironwork fence for the front entryway of their home. Okay, and this is the home next door. This is the historic stable house. This is 79 Flagg Court. Ironwork, it's painted a kind of like a shade of gray. They have it on top of both garages on both sides of the house. So there's a two-car garage here. They have the ironwork running from the home to the ends of the garage, as well as on the terrace on each side of the home. 71 Flagg Court, same thing. They've got ironwork leading to their main door. So the next few slides, it's basically streetscape. It's the past versus the present condition of the home. The photos show the previous condition of the home as seen on the left, as well as the current condition of the home after the work was completed on the right. Both photos are from Flagg Court facing north. The photos simulate walking around the home on Flagg Court from west to east. So this is what the home originally looked like, and this is the home with the renovations. And this is the center view. 2018 to 2025. And here's 2018 to 2025. Looks like the previous owner had a wooden pergola that was removed, and instead he had added the ironwork on the side of the yard. Okay, and this is just what a few photos of what the home looks like. It's present day condition. That's the view from Flagg Court facing northeast and the view from Flagg Court facing west. That is the view from Flagg Court facing Charter Oak Road, looking directly at the home. And that is the view from Flagg Court facing Coventry Road. Now, these are just a few of the other historic homes on the Flagg estate grounds. So they will show historic and contemporary homes on the grounds, specifically the Flagg Court Loop. So this was the main house. This is Stone Court at 209. This is Flagg Court. So it kind of loops around in the back of the home. In the 1980s, the Flagg estate was subdivided into multiple smaller lots and underwent major changes, forming the Copper Flagg Estates. Newer contemporary homes were constructed and historic homes underwent extensive refurbishing. These homes have very similar features as the renovations completed at 91 Flagg Court. They typically share the same uniform gray asphalt shingle roofs, as well as window color and layout. So this is just going to simulate walking down Flagg Court, going from east to south to back to west. So the house on the left is the stables. You can see it has the gray asphalt shingle roof. House on the right is 71 Flagg Court, similar style roof, window color and layout. 63, that was the historic Palm House. That has the gray asphalt shingle roof. Same thing with the windows, color and layout similar. 51 Flagg Court, that is the slate shingle roof, same color, window design layout. 39 Flagg Court, gray asphalt shingle roof, window layout. 27 Flagg Court, gray, same thing, with the roof and window layout. Yeah, 15 Flagg Court and 16 Flagg Court. Same with the windows and roof. Okay, on the last slide, you can see the original drawing for the carriage house alongside a modern day photo. And I feel that even with the modern upgrades, the home still retains the efficient small cottage aesthetic that Ernest Flagg had in mind when constructing the home.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions? Commissioner Ginsburg.
I have a few. First of all, are the windows true divided lights? In other words, are the grill on the front also on the inside and bars in between it so it looks like separate panes of glass?
Yes, the inside is the inside is wood. They are divided, and it's just painted white on the inside.
Okay. And secondly, the finials on the railing, can they be removed?
I don't think that they can remove. When I was looking at the fence up, that they can be removed. When I was looking at the fencing up close, it looks like it's all kind of welded together, and it looks as if the fencing was placed on top of the stonework. It most likely was anchored in and then capped, like covered, just to hide the screws.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, not seeing any. Let's move to public testimony. Is there anybody in the room that would like to testify on this item? Okay, not seeing anybody. Let's move to Elizabeth Lee and testimony on Zoom.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You'll be promoted to panelist, after which we ask you to unmute, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker will be the Historic Districts Council.
It's now 12:33, so good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Manur Fatima. I'm representing the Historic Districts Council. So the Historic Districts Council would like to commend the reuse and readaptation of the structure to provide the house with new opportunities for use. However, we particularly object to the roof material, such as the asphalt shingles, because they don't have the same texture as the original, and there's an opportunity to do good restoration work here. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Jeremy Woodoff. Jeremy, I see that you're unmute. Oh.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Jeremy Woodoff speaking for the Victorian Society, New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the year after passage of the Landmarks Law, and as the first permanent preservation advocacy organization in New York City, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual and scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The VSNY recommends denial of this proposal to legalize the removal of wood shingle roofing and the installation of new asphalt shingles at this building at the Flagg estate. The new shingles are overly smooth and the pale gray color is too light. They do not relate well to the overall character of this building or to others on the site. The garage building was designated as part of the expanded landmark site in 1983. The applicant has provided replicas of drawings dated 1984 from the LPC files, showing the proposal to convert the garage into a house. It appears that the wood shingles date from this renovation and were installed post-designation after LPC review. The applicant has also provided photographs of other houses on the expanded landmark site. These include original Flagg buildings and houses designed by Robert A.M. Stern, added to the site after designation. Some of the roofs have slate, some have asphalt shingles, but all of these roofing materials have more texture and darker tones than the light gray shingles installed without permits. The 1967 designation report for the Flagg House and the 1983 report for the expanded site mention roofing materials only in regard to the mansion and gatehouse. The only roofing material mentioned in the reports is slate. The applicant has also provided excerpts from Flagg's book, Small Houses, Their Economic Design. It recommends the use of inexpensive rolled roofing on modest houses. We do not find this relevant. Mr. Flagg did not use any inexpensive materials at his very grand estate. We do, however, support two aspects of this proposal, the replacement of the windows and the installation of ironwork. They appear to conform to the 1984 design and do not detract from the appearance of the building. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, a note for the record that Staten Island Community Board 2 recommends approval.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to respond to any of the testimony?
No, I just would like to add, this was a little bit unfortunate for me, as when I purchased the home, I had used my title company at the time, and they showed no existing violations on the property. It was only after I had reached out about constructing a pergola over the driveway to the right of the property that I was informed of the violations. If I hadn't known them that there were violations on the home previously, I would have most likely paused with the purchase of the home. So I didn't actually, I wasn't the individual who initiated any of these changes with the home. I was trying to do everything the correct way and reach out. It was only after that point that I was informed. So I just wanted to, come today and try to just, I guess, rectify everything.
We appreciate that. Commissioners, are there any last questions? Okay, not seeing any. We'll move to our discussion. So as we've heard, this is an application to legalize window and roof replacement and the installation of metal railings. Oh, shoot, sorry. I need to close the hearing. I apologize. Commissioner Ginsburg, will you make a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Wilder, will you second the motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the hearing is closed. Sorry about that. So yes, the application to legalize window and roof replacement and the installation of metal railings to a garage building that was modified and converted to residential with commission approvals in the 1980s. So we want to review this to see if the changes that were made are appropriate to this overall landmark. This is a one landmark on an estate. And the materials used here aren't out of place for the outbuildings and new buildings on the landmark site. So there's some precedent for the substitute materials of the roof and windows. And we also need to look at these metal railings for appropriateness. And I think it'd be fitting at Staten Island. Representative Vice Chair Master, start the discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't live that far away from here, so I know this neighborhood quite well, and I understand the context that it's kind of a mix of historic type houses and then newer houses that were constructed all with similar materials and similar look, and that they all face like a U-shaped common area, which is a beautiful kind of expanse of green lawn that they share. So I also want to, before I start, I want to put it into context that this house is heavily renovated in the 1980s. So, you know, when we think about this, you know, this isn't necessarily a typical historic house because it was a garage and it was renovated, you know, in the 1980s to the look that it is now. So when we look at things like this, we kind of say to ourselves, is this something that we would have approved if you had come to us initially? And I understand this wasn't, you know, something that you had done. And overall, I can find it appropriate because a lot of what we're seeing here, let me go through actually element by element. In terms of the roof, clearly the previous roof was in very poor condition. It was rotting, and you replaced it with an asphalt roof. And you've shown us that there are other asphalt roofs with houses in the area that were also designated. So I can find this appropriate. The second component to this is the windows that were replaced. And I think the materials have changed, but the configuration and the fenestration is exactly the same, really not discernible from the public way. So I can also find that appropriate. And then in terms of the ironwork, I understand the need to kind of enclose your yard because, as I said, I do live not too far away and I've had deer, I've had possum, I have a ground chuck that lives in my yard, and we have foxes in the area and they come freely in and out. And so I think it's unusual not to have it enclosed, to be honest, especially with the deer, because they will come and eat everything. So the ironwork in this situation, if it had been brought to us, I think I could have also found it appropriate for a couple reasons. One, there's ironwork on the second floor, so I think it kind of matches what's there. And you've shown us many pictures of the houses in the neighborhood, most of which had ironwork, either in the steps or the yard, even over the stone fence. So overall, I can say I find this appropriate. And I also just want to note that I think you did a wonderful job presenting as a property owner. I was really impressed with the level of detail and well, it was impressive. It was really, you know, you did come up with example after example. So we really appreciate that.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I'm going to go through the three elements. On the roofing, if you'd come to us before you did the work or the previous person, I would have probably accepted asphalt shingles that had more definition. This is a pretty flat shingle. You can get both shingles that look like a slate roof or shingles that look more like a wood shingle roof. So I hate to have someone rip out what is perfectly good roofing. At the same time, I probably would not approve it as is. So I'm interested what my fellow commissioners say. The windows seem fine. On the fence, I would like to see the finials cut off, and I realize I'm sorry to hear that they're not a separate attachment, but I sort of presume someone with a metal saw could evenly cut them off and then fill in the top of the tubing so that they were watertight. So I would do that. I would probably accept the shingle roofing, but I could go either way. But if it ever gets replaced, or when it gets replaced, I'd want to see more definition in the shingles.
Commissioner Kembe.
I guess unfortunately about the roof, I agree that what's there now loses some type of definition, and I would like it to be a little bulkier, but it is what it is, and hopefully next time around that it could be replaced again with something more substantial. I find the windows to be acceptable, and as for the railings, I guess the intent is to try to simplify them a little more by removing the finial. So I can see that as a possible solution, or replacing it, or even just removing it altogether.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
I think that the solution to the roofing issue is, as Commissioner Ginsburg said, is a perfectly good roofing at this moment, and maybe if the commission wants, is wait till the next time when they need to replace the roofing to replace it with the thing. That's just see what the other commissioner think. I have no problem with the replacement windows. I think the windows are fine. I tend to agree with Vice Chair Master. I'm fine with the fencing as is, but if you deem that it needs to cut off the finial, I'd like to see what the rest of the commission want to do.
Commissioner Jefferson.
I would find it difficult because when you buy a house like this in a historic district, it means that you have to take additional responsibility for wanting to live there than the human problem of what human beings go through. This building, the roof is dominant, is the most important part of it. And the texture does make these buildings truly beautiful, at least to me. If there was a way that we could keep it now and next time, 20 years from now, 15 years from now, it has to be redone. It has to be redone properly. That way, I can approve it if we can get that kind of principle put into the LPC. Because, when you buy one of these buildings, you're making a commitment to history. You're making we live anywhere. How you want to live here if you can? You're not going to do it, but in terms of the windows, I can accept it. The windows are fine. And the fencing, the same issue. Those details matter.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. In the past, when we've had situations like this where people generally want to solve a problem that's like an existing situation that's not meeting the standards, didn't we usually not allow it, but give them a long time to cure it? Wasn't that kind of how we dealt with these things?
I mean, there's in the past, I mean, we have done long compliance dates, but not super long, and this would be a very long one. And I think so. I think it's a better approach in this case to look at this and decide whether this roof is, appropriate. And obviously when it wears out, it will be put back. A new roof will come in and will need to be approved by the commission, and will be a slightly better roof. And I just also want to remind everybody, this is not the original roof of the building. Obviously, this is a commission-approved configuration of this roof.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for me, the context of for this building is less, the other Flagg buildings and more the Stern development, which has a much more modern feel to it, and I think for that reason, the asphalt shingle is not as abhorrent as it might otherwise be. I think the idea of removing the finials on the wrought iron is a good idea. I mean, the little sketch with the arch over the pillars gives me a little bit. I think gives the wrought iron a little bit of cover. That there was some proposal to do some kind of lyrical wrought iron stuff. So I can live with the wrought iron. I think the finial removal though is a good idea.
Commissioner Mann.
I concur with Vice Chair Master. I'll follow her lead and guidance on this one.
Commissioner Wilder.
Yeah, I agree with most of what everyone said. I think it would be nice to remove the finials from wrought iron.
Okay, I think, I do think we can make a motion, we have enough to support. Would you be comfortable if we said that they should work with staff on exploring whether the finials can be removed? Yes? Okay. Okay, then let's go there.
In, yeah, okay. In the matter of LPC 26-05642, 91 Flagg Court, expanded landmark site of the Ernest Flagg House, gatehouse and gate individual landmark. A garage building designed by Ernest Flagg and built before 1909. Application is to legalize window and roof replacement and installation of ironwork without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. I note that the building was designed and built by Ernest Flagg as a utilitarian garage related to his own estate. I also note that the garage was originally a secondary structure located within a portion of the estate behind the main mansion, later developed in the late 20th century with the conversion of the outbuildings for residential use and the construction of a new freestanding houses. I further note that Flagg often added to the original massing and experimented with new technologies and materials at his mansion, outbuildings, and the other cottage homes he constructed on Todt Hill. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the work did not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the garage building was highly altered in the 1980s pursuant to a commission approval with an enlarged sloped roof and dormers when it was converted to residential use, that the building is set among other modified original buildings and newly constructed buildings which were part of the commission-approved 1980s development of this portion of the state. Therefore, the use of substitute materials is contextually consistent with the materiality of new and modified buildings throughout this portion of the landmark site. That the 1980s wood shingle roofing was deteriorated and warranted replacement. That historic documentation does not clearly show the original roofing material, and Flagg used a mix of roofing materials at his buildings, including rolled roofing and slate. Therefore, the installation of gray asphalt shingle recalls the finish and patterning of these historic roofing types. That the multi-light casement window above solid panels reflects the size of the historic garage openings and are in keeping with windows historically found on buildings constructed by Flagg and with the configuration approved by prior commission actions. That the dark brown fiberglass-clad wood windows closely resembles wood casement windows in terms of the details and finish, and the change in materials will not be perceptible from the public thoroughfare, and that the work does not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the expanded landmark site of the Ernest Flagg House. I also recommend that the applicant work with staff to see if the finials can be readily removed from the iron fence.
Commissioner Mahan, will you second the motion?
Second?
And Mark, can you call the vote?
Director Savage,
Aye.
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Oh, sorry. And so we are going to break for lunch. And sorry, I'm having a little bit of a computer breakdown here. We're going to break. This concludes our morning session. We are going to break for lunch. It is 12:54 right now, and we are going to aim to return at 1:25 and resume the afternoon session. We will ask that all members of the public on Zoom to voluntarily exit at this time so you don't experience technical difficulties returning to the afternoon session that may arise if we need to remove you from the meeting. So thank you very much. I'm going to ask everybody in the room also to move to the waiting area. Thank you.